The year is 1780. A winter so cold that New York Harbor froze solid, and the world seemed to stop mid-breath. You open your eyes to a pale gray morning that doesn't quite belong to any season you know. The air is brittle, thin, almost glass-like. You half expect it to shatter when you inhale. Somewhere, a wooden shutter bangs against the side of a tavern, over and over, like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. It's New York, but not the one you remember. The city is still a rough jumble of cobblestone and smoke, British flags and whispered rebellion, and beneath it all, the slow groan of winter settling in for the long haul. You pull your cloak tighter. It doesn't help much. The cold isn't something you wear. It's something that wears you. Your boots crunch over the frozen ruts of the street, each sound sharp as flint. From the harbor comes a noise that could be wind, or perhaps the creak of ice beginning to bloom across the water, an invisible hand spreading white lace from shore to shore. Coldest winter in living memory. Someone mutters as you pass. That's what they all say. But they said the same thing last year and the year before that. Humans are optimistic like that, always assuming nature has shown her worst. Spoiler: she hasn't. The harbor's edge is lined with ships, their masts poking through the fog like grave markers. The sails hang stiff, frozen in folds. You can see men out there, small figures hacking at the forming ice with poles and axes. Futile, of course. The Hudson doesn't care about your cargo or your timetable. It's mid-January, 1780, and the temperature has sunk to levels not seen in centuries. Historians later would note that the entire harbor froze solid enough for people to walk from Manhattan to Staten Island. Some even brought their wagons across. A floating fairground of absurd courage and frostbite. You pass a baker's shop, the window steamed only on the inside. Inside, a woman kneads bread by the dim light of a single candle. She's bundled in 3 shawls. The dough looks miserable. Bread doesn't rise well when the yeast itself seems to have given up hope. She catches your eye and shrugs. That universal gesture that says, "What can you do? It's winter." Historians still debate whether this particular cold snap was part of what we now call the Little Ice Age. That centuries-long mood swing in Earth's climate when winters grew deeper, rivers froze, and even the Thames turned into a carnival. It's one of those mysteries science keeps nudging but never quite solves. Like why your socks disappear in the wash. A man at the corner hawks hot chestnuts from a cart. The steam looks theatrical against the pale air. He says business is good, everyone's desperate for warmth, even imaginary warmth that comes from standing near something vaguely warm. You hand him a coin and let the small heat of the paper cone seep into your hands. The chestnuts taste like history, burnt, stubborn, and slightly sweet. You wander toward the docks. The air smells faintly of salt and iron, and beneath the ice, the river murmurs. A deep, slow whisper, like the earth's heartbeat under a thick blanket. The ice groans occasionally, shifting, flexing, alive. A group of boys is testing its edge, daring one another to take a few steps out. You don't say it, but one of them will fall through before noon. There's always one. You pause, just watching the city try to keep moving despite the cold. Women with baskets of wood. Men pulling sleds where carts once rolled. Dogs trotting underfoot with icicles on their whiskers. Life doesn't stop, not even when it probably should. And then you hear it. Faint at first, a melody cutting through the wind. A fiddler, somewhere near the tavern, playing slow and lilting, like a lullaby sung to the frost itself. The tune is soft, hesitant, but persistent. That's humanity in a nutshell. Freezing, half-starved, but still finding a way to hum. You probably won't make it through this day without wishing for spring. But let's be honest, neither will anyone else. Before we go further, take a breath. Pull the blanket up a little higher. If you're enjoying the quiet journey so far, maybe give the video a gentle like. It helps the channel, and honestly, it's the only warmth we can generate tonight. And, while you're at it, comment your location and local time. I like knowing where my travelers are listening from. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The light fades and the wind picks up. You follow the path along the edge of the harbor, where the city gives way to the frozen sea. The world feels suspended, every sound wrapped in wool. You stop beside a group of soldiers, red coats, blue coats, who can tell anymore, gathered around a barrel fire. Their breath makes clouds. One of them tells a story about General Washington crossing the Delaware 3 winters ago. Another laughs and says, "If he tried it now, he could have just walked." The laughter freezes midair, tiny crystals catching the light. Farther out on the ice, someone's set up a table. 2 men play cards by candlelight. One's winning by a mile, the other's pretending not to care. A small jug of rum sits between them, almost empty, because it keeps freezing every 10 minutes. A dog barks. The sound carries oddly, ricocheting between the ice floes like a trapped bird. You think about how strange it must feel, an entire city built on movement suddenly still. Even the river has stopped breathing. You look up. The stars are sharp, cruelly bright. Somewhere in that glittering indifference, the universe continues as if this frozen harbor is no more than a momentary pause. And yet, down here, in this silent pocket of 1780, everything feels infinite. The night deepens. You walk home slowly, snow squeaking beneath your boots. Each step feels like the world's quietest drumbeat. You wake to sunlight. Not that it matters much, the light is pale and useless, the kind of light that promises warmth but delivers none. You breathe, and the air stings. Your breath forms a ghost in the air and lingers like it's reluctant to move on. The window panes are rimmed with frost so intricate it looks deliberate, like a lace curtain made by a god with too much time on their hands. You scrape a circle clear with your thumb and peer out. The harbor glows white, dazzling, endless. Ships stand motionless, their hulls locked tight. Somewhere in the street below, a preacher shouts about divine punishment. He's been at it all week. Something about sin and weather always pairs nicely in times like these. You sip water that tastes faintly of ice and would smoke. If this is divine punishment, you think, at least it's symmetrical. Outside, children slide across the frozen street, laughing, bundled in rags. Adults watch them, equal parts amused and terrified. Everyone knows how thin the line is, between fun and tragedy, between adventure and obituary. In the harbor, makeshift tents have begun to appear. People are setting up markets on the ice itself. Because, of course, if the river's frozen, why waste good space? There's bread for sale, candles, salted fish, even a man carving tiny sculptures out of ice and selling them for pennies. Commerce never sleeps, it just wears mittens. A curious fact, during this winter, there are accounts of entire wagons crossing the ice between Manhattan and Staten Island. Not once, not twice, regularly. They say even cannon could roll across it without breaking through. For a brief, absurd season, the Hudson turned into a road. Nature, it seems, occasionally enjoys irony. You walk among the stalls. The air smells of wax and smoke, of salt and pine pitch. Somewhere, someone's frying something, maybe fish, maybe hope. You buy a candle and a small loaf of bread. Both seem symbolic somehow, though you can't say of what. A young woman is selling letters, not writing them, selling them. She explains that they're copied love notes from soldiers to their sweethearts. To keep you warm, you buy one out of curiosity. It reads, "My dearest, I think of you each night the wind howls, and I imagine the frost between us melting in your smile." Corny, but effective. You tuck it into your coat pocket. A historian centuries later will argue that this winter was the coldest ever recorded in the northeastern United States. Others contest it, saying perhaps the measurements were exaggerated or records misread. Historians still debate whether the mercury truly sank below -20 degrees Fahrenheit, or if memory simply likes to dramatize suffering. You find yourself back near the edge of the harbor. The ice stretches endlessly, and yet you can feel the movement beneath, slow, ancient, like the world shifting in its sleep. A boy skates past, a blur of wool and red cheeks. He looks free in a way no adult ever is. You smile. Then he falls spectacularly, landing flat. The sound echoes. He pops up laughing, brushing frost from his hat. Humans, endlessly breakable, endlessly resilient. You pass a man in a tricorn hat, painting the frozen ships. He tells you he's capturing history before it melts. His fingers are blue, but his eyes are alive. Maybe they'll remember this winter, he says, or maybe it'll fade like breath. As evening falls, the ice glows gold in the low sun. You can almost forget the hardship, almost. Somewhere a fiddler strikes up again. Maybe the same one from last night. The tune drifts through the cold air, threading between tense and laughter, firelight and frost. You stop listening. The melody loops gently, hypnotically, like the world turning on a quieter axis. And as the last light fades, you feel something rare for a winter like this. Peace. You wake before dawn, though wake might be generous. It's more like you drift from one shade of cold consciousness to another. The fire's gone out, and the room is still. The silence is so deep it hums in your ears. You could swear you hear the ice outside shifting, settling, breathing like a sleeping beast. You pull on your coat, boots stiff as bark, and step outside. The city is draped in that peculiar gray-blue light that belongs only to mornings like this. You can't tell where sky ends and snow begins. The world is one seamless watercolor wash. Somewhere, a church bell tries to ring, but the sound is dull, muted, as if the air itself can't be bothered to carry it. You walk down toward the harbor again. It's become habit now, as though the frozen river has magnetized the entire city. Everyone ends up there eventually. The streets are quiet except for the sound of sled runners scraping and the soft whinny of horses steaming like kettles. The harbor has changed overnight. What was an open field of white yesterday has turned into a bustling village. The ice market, they're calling it. You blink, almost laugh. Human optimism again. When life gives you a frozen river, apparently you set up a carnival. There are stalls now, proper wooden ones, not the tents from before. Merchants shout, their voices soft with frost. A fiddler plays near a bonfire made from broken ship timber. Someone's roasting meat or something pretending to be meat over an open flame. The air smells of salt and smoke and cheap ale. You buy a mug of something warm, though you can't quite tell what's in it. It burns pleasantly. The merchant grins with teeth that have never met a toothbrush. Good, yes, he says. Keeps the frost out. You nod. It's a lie, but a comforting one. Out in the distance, you see people skating. Not gracefully, not even competently, but joyfully. A boy falls, a woman laughs. Someone claps. The ice cracks in protest, but no one listens. It's said that during the winter of 1780, you could walk clear across the Hudson from New York to Paulus Hook in New Jersey. And people did. They dragged carts, barrels, even livestock. Some called it a miracle, others a curse. The harbor wasn't a harbor anymore. It was a street. And yet, amid all this, there's something strange. You can't shake it. This sense that the world has tilted slightly off its axis. That everything you see, the laughter, the trade, the ice itself, feels temporary, like a stage set that could melt away at any moment. A woman sells tiny paintings of frozen ships. The colors are dull, the brushwork clumsy, but there's heart in it. Souvenirs, she says softly. Before it all goes, you buy one. She smiles, teeth chattering. They say this ice will stay till March, she adds. Or maybe April. Or maybe forever. Historians still debate whether the harbor froze so solid you could light a bonfire in its center. Some insist it did. Others say people's memories exaggerated under hardship. But even the skeptics admit the cold of 1780 was brutal beyond measure. The kind that made ink freeze in pens, that cracked church bells, that silenced everything but the wind. You wander to the far edge, where a group of soldiers in threadbare coats are dragging barrels across the ice. Supplies, probably. Or rum. Hard to say which is more vital. One of them waves, and you wave back. His face is raw, wind-burned, but there's a grin there. People smile even when the world stops spinning. It's one of humanity's better tricks. You find a spot beside a small fire and sit. The flames crackle softly, smoke curling upward like a prayer that's forgotten its words. Someone hands you a piece of hard bread, half frozen, half edible. You take it gratefully. The fiddler's still playing somewhere. The same slow tune, carried thin on the wind. You recognize it now. It's the parting glass, though slower, dreamier. A song for endings. You chew your bread, sip your drink, and feel, for a moment, that the world, even frozen, is still alive. Somewhere above, a gull cries. The sound echoes across the white expanse, lonely but enduring. You pull your coat tighter. The sky's darkening again. Evening already. In winters like these, daylight is a rumor. You stand, your body stiff, and head home. Past the vendors, the fires, the laughter. Past the harbor that used to be a river. Past the city that refuses to surrender. That night, the cold sharpens. You can feel it even through the walls. Wood groans, glass cracks. Water in the jug beside your bed turns to ice by dawn. You don't even bother to light a fire this morning. The effort feels pointless. Outside, the air is utterly still. Not quiet, but still, like the world's holding its breath. You walk out into the street and see your neighbors moving slower than usual, like everyone's underwater. Frost flowers climb up the walls of every building, blooming where no life should. You pass by a tavern. The door is open, warmth spilling out in gold light and rough laughter. Inside, sailors huddle by the hearth, faces red and hands raw. One's telling a story about the last ship to make it through before the harbor froze. A British sloop, half crushed by the ice but stubbornly afloat. Someone jokes, maybe the ice will hold till the summer. We'll all just live out there. The room laughs, half genuine, half afraid. You sit in the corner, order something hot. The barkeep pours cider, steaming and fragrant with cloves. Cold enough for ya? He says. It's the same joke everyone makes. Every year, every winter. And somehow it never stops being funny. You glance toward the window, the frost outside glowing blue under the moonlight. For a moment, you think you see something moving on the ice. Figures in the distance, flickering shadows. A caravan? A parade? Or maybe just tricks of the light. The harbors become a mirror for imagination. One sailor swears he saw a fox running across the river 2 nights ago. Another claims it was a wolf. The barkeep snorts. Could have been anything, he says. Could have been nothing. And maybe that's the truth of this winter. No one's quite sure what's real anymore. You sip the cider. It warms your chest, makes the edges of the world a little softer. Outside, a wind begins to rise. It starts low, like a hum beneath your feet, then builds. A moan through the alleys, a whistle through the shutters, a sigh across the ice. The whole city seems to shiver. You step outside. Snow begins to fall, slow, deliberate flakes, each one unique, each one doomed. You tilt your head back and watch them drift down. Feel them melt on your skin. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings. You count the echoes. 5, 6, 7. Time doesn't mean much anymore. The harbor gleams faintly in the moonlight, vast and white and eternal. You walk toward it, pulled by some quiet instinct. Out there, in the middle of all that frozen stillness, a small group of people gathers around a bonfire. Their voices rise, soft, half singing, half praying. The words are lost to the wind, but the tone is unmistakable. Hope, however fragile. You stop at the edge of the ice. The air smells faintly of pine and salt and smoke. You close your eyes, and for the first time the silence feels like peace, not punishment. Morning arrives reluctantly, like even the sun doesn't want to be here. The light seeps through the frost-covered window, pale and hesitant. You wake to the sound of something shifting, not inside your room, but outside, in the city. It's a sound between a sigh and a groan, like 1,000 doors opening at once. You step out into the street, breath puffing white in the cold. The harbor has changed again. Overnight, the wind carved new patterns across the ice, long, sweeping ridges that catch the light like veins of silver. It's beautiful in that bleak, end-of-the-world sort of way. People move slowly, bundled to the point of anonymity. The air is so sharp it stings your eyes. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then thinks better of it. You pass a cart piled with firewood, each piece worth its weight in gold. A woman argues with the seller, her breath and his mingling like dueling ghosts. Historians will later record that this day, February 5, 1780, was among the coldest ever measured in colonial America. The harbor froze from shore to shore, solid enough to bear sleighs, wagons, even small cannon. You think of that as you step onto the ice again. It feels impossibly thick, impossibly solid, as though time itself has paused beneath your feet. Someone's built a makeshift tavern out on the ice. They call it the Frost Inn. It's little more than a tent and a barrel fire, but there's ale, laughter, and music. People gather there just to feel less alone. You wander in. The air inside smells of wood smoke, sweat, and faint hope. A fiddler plays by the fire, his fingers moving quick and sure despite the cold. A man beside you leans over, half drunk already. "Never thought I'd drink a pint standing on a river," he says, chuckling. "Guess there's a first time for everything." You smile. "Hope it's not the last." He laughs. "Depends how long this ice holds." Someone toasts to surviving the winter, and mugs clink like fragile bells. You join in. Across the room, a woman in a red shawl reads cards for a coin. Her hands tremble not from cold, from something else. You give her a penny, sit down. She flips one card after another, the tower, the hermit, the sun. "Bad winter," she says softly, "but spring always remembers." You nod, not sure whether she's comforting you or herself. Outside, a sudden crack echoes across the harbor. Everyone freezes, no pun intended. The fiddler stops mid-note. Silence hangs heavy for a moment. Then someone laughs nervously. "Just the ice stretching," they say. "It does that." You want to believe them. You walk back toward shore as the day dims. The air turns bluer, colder. A gust of wind catches your coat, sends snow spiraling around your feet. You look back once, at the flickering fires on the ice, small pockets of warmth on an endless white field. A historian, years later, would write that the people of New York walked upon their river as though it were a road of glass, and marveled at their own endurance. You like that. It sounds poetic. It sounds almost brave. You stop at the edge of the ice, listening to the distant laughter carried on the wind. Then you turn, walk back through the narrow streets, where frost clings to the eaves like lace, and the city exhales small clouds of human stubbornness. You probably won't make it through this night without shivering, but somehow that feels like part of the ritual. It's the middle of the night when you wake again. Something has changed. The silence feels thicker. You sit up, listening. There's a sound, faint but distinct, like a drumbeat far below your feet. The ice shifting again, breathing, alive. You light a small candle, the flame trembling in the draft. Shadows flicker across the room. You can see your breath in the air, curling like smoke. You pull on your coat and step outside. The city sleeps uneasily. Every rooftop is white, every alley filled with blue shadows. The harbor glows faintly under the moonlight, a vast plain of silver. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, or maybe it's just the wind's lonely impression of one. You walk down to the water's edge. The cold bites at your cheeks, but you hardly notice. The moon is full tonight, hanging low and pale over the frozen river. It lights up the ice like glass, and there, faintly, you see figures moving across it. A line of people, bundled silhouettes, trudging slowly from one shore to the other. Lanterns swing in their hands, glowing like fireflies. It's eerie and beautiful all at once. You stand watching as they pass, silent, steady. Families, merchants, soldiers. Life in motion even when the world has stopped. You think about how strange this must seem to anyone watching from above. Humans walking where water should be, trusting a frozen surface not to betray them. You take a few steps out onto the ice yourself. The surface hums faintly underfoot, resonating like a living thing. The air smells faintly of salt and iron. Your breath hangs in a cloud. Halfway out, you stop. The city behind you is just a dark silhouette now, towers and chimneys rising like jagged teeth. Ahead, the far shore glimmers faintly in the moonlight. You imagine what it would feel like to keep walking, to leave the city behind, to vanish into that white horizon. Then you hear it again, that deep, distant groan. The ice shifts beneath your feet. You freeze instinctively. The sound passes, low and resonant, like thunder underwater. You exhale slowly. All right, you murmur to the ice. You win. You turn back. The city looks warmer now, golden lights twinkling faintly through the frost. You walk carefully, each step deliberate, like a conversation between you and the frozen river. When you finally reach the shore again, you find an old man sitting on a barrel, watching the harbor. His beard is white, his coat patched. He nods as you approach. Beautiful, isn't it? You nod. Terrifying, too. He chuckles. Most beautiful things are. You sit beside him for a while. The silence between you feels companionable. After a moment, he says, "They say this winter's punishment for all our noise. Maybe the world just needed a rest." You look out over the frozen harbor. "Maybe," you say, "or maybe it's just weather." He smiles faintly. "Maybe those are the same thing." The wind picks up, scattering snow across the ice like whispers. The old man hums something under his breath, a tune you almost recognize. It sounds like an old hymn, the kind sung to keep fear at bay. You listen. You breathe. You let the cold seep in until it becomes part of you. When you finally rise to leave, the candlelight in distant windows flickers like stars. You turn toward home, each step measured, soft. Behind you, the old man keeps humming, his voice fading into the wind. You don't look back. Morning returns, though morning feels like a generous word. It's less an arrival than a dim loosening of night's grip. You wake beneath layers of blankets so heavy they could be considered a minor architectural feat. Your first breath is a cloud. The window glass is a work of art. Frost crystals have mapped the world into strange white continents, delicate as lace and sharp as salt. You reach out and brush a finger along the pattern. It melts instantly, a brief rebellion against permanence. The street outside is muffled. Snow piles higher than the steps now. Someone's shoveling, their rhythm steady and resigned. You hear a cart creaking by, the horse's breath puffing in bursts, like small engines of survival. It's hard to remember a time before cold became your most frequent companion. The city has gone quiet, too quiet for New York, even in 1780. But you kind of like it. The silence has a strange intimacy, as though the world itself has leaned in to listen. You pull on your coat, boots, and hat, and step into the day. The snow squeaks underfoot, a sound so crisp it feels ceremonial. Down by the harbor, people have started calling it the Great Frost Fair. And it's true, life persists, stubborn and inventive. There are stalls on the ice now, hot chestnuts, roasted apples, even cheap toys carved from bone. Someone's selling mulled cider from a kettle. It smells of cinnamon and burnt sugar. You take a cup and let the warmth sting your hands. It's hard to imagine that beneath all this cheer, the river still waits. Alive, patient, dangerous. But no one talks about that. People need the illusion of control, especially when they're standing on water pretending it's ground. One stall sells ice prints, small woodcuts of people skating, bundled lovers, children playing. The artist is a young man with ink-stained gloves and a thin scarf. He looks up as you approach. "Would you like your likeness made?" he asks. You smile. "Does it come with warmer weather?" He laughs, a short, honest sound. "No, but it'll outlast the thaw." You pose for a moment as he sketches. His hands move quick and sure, though the ink keeps freezing in the pot. "They say this frost's the coldest since records began," he mutters. "I suppose that makes us famous." "Or foolish," you reply. He grins. "Usually the same thing." When he finishes, he hands you the print. Your face half lost in scarf and shadow, eyes reflecting the distant fires. It's oddly accurate, unsettlingly so. "Keep it," he says, "free of charge. Consider it a record of endurance." You thank him and move on. The fair stretches farther than you expected. Sleds, games, even a preacher shouting from atop a crate about divine judgment. His breath fogs with every word. "The Lord froze the waters as a sign," he cries. You sip your cider and think, quietly, maybe the Lord just needed a break from us. A historian would later note that the winter of 1780 saw sermons delivered on the frozen Hudson itself. Congregations assembled upon the river's face. One wrote, "As though on marble, the image fits, fragile faith on uncertain ground." As afternoon leans toward dusk, the wind picks up again. You turn your face away from it and head toward the edge of the ice, where the city looks dim and distant. Somewhere behind you, a child laughs, the sound bright and startling against the cold. You pause, listening. The laughter echoes, bounces off the frozen masts of ships, hangs there like a memory. Then it fades, and the silence, your old friend, returns. You probably won't make it through this day without feeling small. But that's the beauty of winter. It teaches humility better than any sermon. Night again. The city glows faintly, a constellation of candles scattered across the white. You walk along the narrow streets, your boots crunching through fresh snow. The sound feels private, like a secret conversation between you and the earth. You pass a tavern, warm light spilling through the windows, laughter rolling out like music. You hesitate, then step inside. The room is smoky, crowded, alive. The smell of ale, tallow, and wet wool fills the air. At the bar, a sailor tells a story about crossing the harbor on foot. "I saw a man with a sled," he says, "dragging barrels across the ice like it was nothing. You could build a road out there." Someone scoffs. "Until it cracks." The sailor grins. "Then we'll float to England." Everyone laughs. Not because it's funny, but because laughter is cheaper than fear. You order a drink and find a corner seat. The wood is cold, but the firelight feels good on your face. For a while, you just listen to the stories, the half-truths, the rhythm of survival. A fiddler starts to play, the same tune you heard on the ice days ago. A woman hums along softly, eyes half closed. The song loops endlessly, hypnotic and tender. You feel yourself drifting, not into sleep exactly, but into a soft kind of stillness. Then someone bursts through the door. A young man, face flushed, snow in his hair. "The harbor," he gasps. "It's cracking." Near the battery, the room goes still. For a moment no one moves. Then people rush out, you among them. The cold slaps you awake as you step into the night. Down the street, others run toward the river, torches bobbing in the dark. When you reach the shore, you see it. A jagged black line cutting through the ice like a scar. Steam rises faintly where the water shows through. People stand along the edge, whispering. "It's starting to melt," someone says. "Too soon," another replies. Historians still debate the exact sequence of the thaw, whether it came slowly, in cautious fragments, or all at once in a single terrifying break. But in this moment, it feels like the world has taken its first deep breath in months. The crack widens with a soft, resonant groan. You step back instinctively. Someone tosses a log onto the ice, and it rolls to the edge before vanishing into the dark water. The crowd murmurs, awe, fear, relief, all tangled together. For the first time in weeks, you smell the sea again, briny, alive. You didn't realize how much you'd missed it. A woman beside you whispers, "It's like waking up." You nod. Or being reminded we're breakable. The wind shifts, carrying a faint, wet scent. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cries. The first bird you've heard in ages. You stand there for a long while, watching the ice tremble under the moonlight. Feels like the end of something, though you can't say what. Eventually, you turn back toward the city. The streets are quieter now, the fires dimmer. You think about the fair, the laughter, the frozen prince. All soon to be memories drowned beneath the thaw. You pause at the door to your room, look once more toward the harbor, and whisper, "Thank you." You're not sure who you're thanking. Maybe the river, maybe the cold, maybe the strange, fragile resilience of everyone who walked on water and called it living. You step inside, close the door, and let the silence settle again. The days that follow feel borrowed, thin light, brittle cold, and the slow sound of ice learning to let go. You wake to the distant rumble of shifting sheets of frozen harbor. It's not quite thunder, not quite cracking wood, but something in between, the groan of a world rearranging itself. You sit at your window again, watching. The frost has begun to weep, little rivulets tracing soft patterns down the glass. Beneath it, New York exhales. People are restless. The fair has thinned out, stalls half dismantled, ice prints curling at the corners. The preacher's gone silent, probably ran out of things to declare divine. Even the dogs seem cautious now, walking with the tentative care of philosophers testing a theory. You wrap your scarf, step outside, and breathe the air, damp, uncertain, carrying the smell of river mud and wood smoke. It feels like a question more than an answer. Down at the harbor, men work with poles and hooks, testing the cracks. Some have started to pull their ships closer, eager to sail again. The masts stand like tall, frozen trees, creaking softly in the wind. A sailor you vaguely recognize, the same one who joked about floating to England, is standing by the edge, staring into the widening water. "Reckon it's time?" you ask. He shrugs. "Maybe. Depends what you call safe." You smirk. A word that's lost all meaning lately. He chuckles, teeth flashing white against his wind-chapped face. "Aye. Winter's been generous with lessons, stingy with mercy." As you walk along the shore, you spot something strange. A lone barrel drifting slowly in the slush, its path lazy, unbothered. A child points at it, laughing. A sound so normal, so alive, it almost hurts. Later, in one of the remaining taverns, you overhear talk of the cold's true reach. Even the Delaware froze solid, says a man hunched over his mug. You could walk from Jersey to Philadelphia if you had the nerve. He's not exaggerating. The winter of 1780 was one of the harshest on record. Rivers frozen so hard that wagons crossed them like roads. Supply lines broke, armies starved, and yet life, stubborn as frostweed, went on. Historians still debate whether the harbor fully froze or just enough to fool fools like us. Someone adds with a laugh. You raise your mug slightly. To the fools, then. Without them, history would be much shorter. The crowd chuckles. You sip, savoring the heat, the taste of half-burned ale. Later, when you step outside again, twilight has fallen. The city hums faintly, a strange mix of returning motion and lingering fear. You walk toward the waterfront, where the first brave skiffs test the edges of the ice. The sound of oars meeting slush is almost musical, like a hesitant orchestra tuning before a performance. You pause near the edge of the pier. The air is softer now, but the cold remains patient, like a cat pretending to nap while still watching everything. You find yourself whispering again. Maybe to the river, maybe to yourself. Don't go too quickly, because there's beauty in the stillness, even if it hurts. There's peace in the frost, even when it refuses to let you move. And somewhere deep down, you already know. You'll miss this silence when it's gone. It's early evening, the kind of dusky blue hour that makes everything feel like it's waiting for a decision. You walk along Pearl Street, the lamps glowing faintly in the mist. The snow here is slush now, gray and soft, the texture of forgotten promises. You sidestep puddles that reflect a ghostly moon, and in each reflection, the city seems to tremble slightly. From a nearby alley, someone is singing, a low, lilting tune. You follow it until you find the source. A man sitting beside a small brazier, warming his hands. His coat is patched, his boots worn to near fiction. He nods as you approach. Evening, he says. His voice is gentle, surprisingly rich. Care for a seat? Fire's half a friend, but better than none. You sit. The flames dance between you, thin but steady. Been out here long? You ask. He smiles faintly. Since before the harbor froze. I sell candles, though lately people prefer the dark. It costs less. You laugh softly. Fair point. He reaches into his satchel and pulls one out. A simple beeswax taper, smooth and gold. They say bees stop making wax in winters like this. But I found a hive under the eaves of St. Paul's. Brave little creatures, still working while the rest of us complain. You roll the candle between your hands. You should write that down. Sounds like scripture. He shrugs. Maybe I will. Someday. You hand him a few coins, take the candle, and promise to light it tonight. As you walk away, the faint melody returns behind you. Slow, circular, the kind of tune that lingers long after it ends. When you reach home, you set the candle on the table and strike a spark. The flame catches easily, burns steady, golden. You sit beside it, watching wax begin to pool. Outside, the wind sighs through the cracks in the window. You pull out the print you bought at the Frost Fair. Your face, your scarf, your weary eyes. You trace the lines with a fingertip. The artist's hand is gone, but his moment remains. The candlelight flickers across the paper, and for a second, the eyes in the print almost seem alive. You smile at your own foolishness, though not enough to look away. Somewhere out there, the harbor continues to shift and crack, a slow symphony of thaw. Ships creak in their moorings, ropes groan like tired lungs. The air smells faintly of salt and hope. You lean back in your chair, eyes half closed. The warmth from the candle touches your face. Historians still debate whether this winter changed anything lasting, whether it hardened resolve, reshaped trade, or merely passed as all winters do, leaving behind stories that melt in memory. But tonight, in your small, flickering circle of light, you feel something simple and sure: survival. Quiet, stubborn, unremarkable survival. You lift your candle slightly, as though offering it to the river, to the ice, to the invisible bees still working somewhere in the dark. "Here's to you," you whisper. "May we both make it to spring." The flame leans, bows, and steadies again. The sound of dripping wakes you. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic, a metronome for thawing worlds. You open your eyes to see the ceiling stained with tiny veins of moisture, each drop catching the light like a jewel before it falls. The room smells of damp wood and ash. Somewhere outside, a cart creaks past, wheels sloshing through slush instead of crunching snow. It's been almost 3 months since the harbor froze. The city is beginning to move again, though cautiously, like a man testing his legs after a long illness. You step outside into air that feels different, softer. The cold is still there, yes, but diluted, thoughtful. A kind of mercy, though not quite forgiveness. The streets are mud and puddles. Children splash in them, laughing, their boots ruined beyond saving. Merchants sweep melted snow out of doorways, muttering about ruined goods and swollen barrels. You walk toward the harbor again because that's what you do now, the same way some people visit a church or a grave. The ice is still there in patches, but thin, transparent, ghostly. It looks like glass that's forgotten how to be strong. Ships rock gently now, their hulls creaking with the rhythm of reawakening tides. You pause near one, the Mercy, its name painted in flaking black letters. A sailor is scrubbing the deck, humming tunelessly. You call out a greeting. He looks up, squints. "You again? Me again?" He grins. "Thought you'd gone south like a sensible person." You shrug. "I'm starting to suspect I'm neither sensible nor migratory." He laughs, shaking his head. "A rare combination." You walk along the pier together, boards slick beneath your boots. "The harbor looks alive again," you say. He nods. "Aye, though she'll remember." Ice leaves scars you can't always see. A gust of wind cuts between you, sharp and wet. The sailor looks toward the horizon. "You know," he says, "I heard tell that up in Boston they rode carriages across the bay. Whole processions, banners, musicians, the works." You raise an eyebrow. "Seems excessive." He grins. "That's Boston for you." The two of you share a quiet laugh that disappears into the wind. Historians still debate whether that story's true, if the bay really held long enough for parades and horses and bravado. But here, now, watching the harbor tremble and breathe, it doesn't seem impossible. People do strange things when the world freezes. Stranger still when it starts to move again. You linger a while longer, watching the thin ice drift out to sea. It breaks apart slowly with a sound like sighing. You imagine each piece carrying away a memory. Laughter from the frost fair, sermons from the ice, the faint smell of cider. As you turn to leave, you notice something half buried in the mud near the shore. You crouch, brush it off. A small wooden toy horse, one wool missing, its paint long gone. You hold it for a moment, uncertain why it feels significant. Then you slip it into your pocket and keep walking. Evenings come later now. The sun lingers, flirting with the horizon like it's afraid to leave. You find yourself walking through the city again. A habit, a ritual. Everything smells of thaw, earth, wood, wet leather. Life emerging cautiously, like someone peeking out from under too many blankets. On Broad Street, a group of laborers gather around a fire, warming their hands. You join them. Someone passes a tin cup. The drink tastes like molasses and smoke. You don't ask what's in it. They're talking about spring planting, about soil so hard they'll need pickaxes, about seeds frozen through. One man says, "At least the rats are gone." Another replies, "Don't jinx it." You smile quietly. Conversation in 1780 has a certain rhythm, practical, fatalistic, and somehow poetic in its bluntness. Someone asks where you were during the deep freeze. You tell them, the harbor, the fair, the ice prince, the candle cellar. They nod, listening with that peculiar patience people give to stories they're half certain are exaggerations. When you finish, one of them, a thin man with calloused hands and kind eyes, says, "We'll be telling tales of that winter till our grandchildren are sick of it." You grin. That's how history happens. Someone complains about the past long enough, and suddenly it's worth remembering. He laughs, slaps your shoulder, and raises his cup. To memory, then, and to thaw. The fire crackles. Sparks rise into the cooling sky. Later, you walk toward the edge of the city. There's a small church there, its windows glowing faintly. Inside, a few candles burn on the altar. The pews creak as you sit. The priest nods at you, murmurs a quiet greeting, then returns to his prayers. The air smells of wax and damp wood. You take out the candle you bought weeks ago, the beeswax one, and light it from the altar flame. For a moment, the two fires dance together, twin reflections. You set yours down beside the others. Watch the wax melt slowly, pooling like gold. Historians still debate whether the winter of 1780 brought more death or more faith. The priest says softly, almost to himself, "I think maybe it just brought clarity." You nod, not trusting your voice. When you leave, the sky is pale violet. The harbor glimmers faintly in the distance, no longer frozen, but still wearing its scars. You walk home through streets that smell faintly of mud and baking bread, a luxury that now feels miraculous. In your pocket, the little wooden horse presses against your hand. You take it out, turn it over in the fading light. It's just a toy, but somehow it feels like proof. Proof that life kept going, even when the world stood still. You set it on your table beside the candle stub and the ice print. Artifacts of endurance, small and unassuming. The room feels warmer than it has in months. You exhale. The sound of it almost surprises you, the quiet, living proof of breath. Spring doesn't arrive all at once. It sidles in shyly, disguised as slush and birdsong. You wake to the sound of dripping again. Faster now, lively, impatient. The streets outside your window are no longer white but streaked with brown and gold. The air tastes faintly of soil and smoke. You pull your coat tighter, out of habit more than need, and step outside. There's a brightness to the day that feels almost suspicious. After so many weeks of cold, warmth seems like a rumor you're afraid to believe. Down the street, children chase each other through puddles. They're laughing, wild and muddy, unburdened by the memory of frostbite or hunger. It's almost funny. The city that was silent now can't stop talking. Vendors shout prices. Carts rattle over thawing cobblestones. Church bells ring as if trying to catch up on all the Sundays they missed. You find yourself smiling at the noise. It's messy, chaotic, gloriously alive. As you walk, you pass a woman beating a rug with impressive vengeance. "Can't let winter linger," she mutters. "Gets into everything if you let it." You nod gravely. "That's how frost works. And guilt." She snorts a laugh. "Same cure for both, I suppose. Sunlight and stubbornness." There's something comforting in her certainty. People in 1780 don't have much, but they have that, the gift of stubborn joy. You head toward the harbor again. The ice is gone now, replaced by restless water and the rhythmic slap of waves. Ships have started to leave, sails unfurling like wings after too long folded. The air smells of tar, salt, and the faint sweetness of freedom. You stand by the pier and watch one ship drift out, its flag flapping lazily in the wind. A man beside you murmurs, "They're headed for Boston. Heard the armies moving again." You nod. The war feels distant now, muffled by snow and silence, but it never really left. People just stopped talking about it while their fingers were too numb to load muskets. Historians still debate how much the winter slowed the revolution, he continues. Some say it nearly ended it. You think about the soldiers, the camps, the empty stores. And yet here we are, you say, thawed but still breathing. He smiles faintly. That's all any of us can hope for. The tide laps against the pier, soft and insistent. You close your eyes and listen. For the first time in months, the sound isn't ominous. It's a lullaby. As you walk home later, you pass the old printmaker's stall. It's empty now, just scraps of paper fluttering in the breeze. You pick one up, a smudge of ink, a half-finished figure, and slip it into your pocket beside the toy horse. Everything feels half-finished these days. But maybe that's what healing is, a slow, patient continuation rather than an ending. You probably won't make it through this day without sentimentality. But after a winter like that, sentimentality feels like a kind of grace. It rains that night, a steady, cleansing rain. You lie awake, listening to it drumming on the roof. Each drop feels like a note in some long-forgotten melody, the kind you can almost hum but never quite remember. You drift in and out of sleep, dreaming of frozen rivers that melt into mirrors, of candles that never go out, of ships sailing through clouds instead of waves. When morning comes, everything glistens. The streets are slick, the rooftops shining like new coins. You breathe deeply, air rich with moisture, moss, and a faint metallic scent from the harbor. You step outside without your coat for the first time in months. The air is still cool, but it no longer bites. It brushes. You wander toward the church again, where the priest is sweeping water out the doorway. He pauses, smiles. "I told you it would end," he says. You grin. "I believed you, eventually." He leans on his broom. Funny thing about winters like that. They make believers out of everyone, even the ones who shouldn't be. Inside, the candles burn low. You add a new one, the last of your beeswax, and light it. The flame steadies instantly, as if eager to join its kin. The priest watches. Do you ever miss it? The quiet. You consider. Sometimes. It was cruel, but it was honest. Cold doesn't lie. It just is. He nods slowly. Perhaps that's why people found God in it. You don't answer. There's a truth in that too. Outside, you walk through puddles reflecting a brightening sky. The city hums again. Louder, happier, rough around the edges. A baker shouts about fresh bread, and the scent is enough to make you pause. You buy a loaf, still warm, steam curling through the crust. You tear off a piece and eat as you walk. Soft, sweet, miraculous. You laugh under your breath, half from joy, half disbelief. Bread feels like a feast after months of rations and salt pork. Halfway home, you see the sailor again, the one from the Mercy. He's sitting on a barrel, sharpening a knife, eyes bright with travel plans. Heading out soon? You ask. He nods. Tomorrow, if the wind holds. You pause. You'll miss the thaw. He smirks. I've had enough thawing. Time for motion. You nod in understanding. Fair winds, then. He grins. And warm hearths to you. You part ways, the kind of farewell that doesn't feel final, just part of the long rhythm of leaving and returning that defines every port city. Back home, you set the bread beside your candle stub and your small relics, the toy horse, the smudged print, the melted wax. Your personal museum of the forgotten winter. You sit for a while, watching the light fade, thinking about everything that froze and everything that thawed. Historians still debate what the Great Winter meant, to soldiers, to merchants, to faith, to fear. But sitting here, surrounded by silence and small mercies, you realize something simple. The cold was never the enemy. It was the reminder. A reminder that warmth means more when you've nearly forgotten it exists. You wake to birdsong. It's faint at first, hesitant, uncertain, but real. After months of howling wind and cracking ice, that soft chirping feels like a miracle performed just for you. You lie there for a moment, eyes closed, listening. The world outside has changed its voice. When you step into the street, New York looks almost human again. The harbor glimmers faintly beneath a milky morning fog. Carriages creak past, and the smell of yeast and coal fills the air. Someone's frying fish, someone else is laughing. Two sounds you'd nearly forgotten could coexist. You pass the tavern on Hanover Square. The door is open, and you glimpse a small crowd inside. Faces flushed not from frostbite but from warmth. The barkeep is bragging that his ale aged beautifully through the cold, which is probably true and definitely an exaggeration. You grin as you pass. People will boast about anything that survived winter. Bread. Themselves. Down by the docks, the ice that once imprisoned ships has broken into drifting shards. Glistening teeth floating lazily in the tide. Sailors call to each other, ropes swinging, boots slapping on wet planks. A few boys throw pebbles at the ice, trying to sink the last bits as if they can hasten spring by willpower alone. You stand beside an old man sketching the harbor. His hands shake, but his lines are clean and sure. You glance at the page. Masts, gulls, bits of floating ice rendered with patient grace. Recording what's left of the cold? You ask. He smiles without looking up. Recording what it took. A seagull screeches above, and you both flinch instinctively. It's the kind of sound that belongs to summer, and neither of you quite trusts it yet. He adds softly, historians will argue about what froze and what didn't. But I was here. I saw the harbor harden like glass. Ships stuck as though nailed in place. You don't argue with that. You just draw it. You nod. Maybe that's all history is. People drawing what didn't melt. He chuckles, eyes still on his sketch. And people forgetting what did. You watch the water shift, small waves nudging the last pieces of ice against the pier. Each crack is a farewell. You close your eyes and breathe. There's salt in the air again. Honest, briny, alive. For the first time in months, it doesn't taste like fear. As you walk back toward the city, a child runs past you carrying a bundle of flowers. Scraggly things, more stem than petal, but bright all the same. You ask where she found them, and she beams. Under the church steps, she says. They were hiding. You smile. Smart flowers. She nods sagely. They waited till the cold stopped shouting. That evening, you sit by the window writing by candlelight. The room smells faintly of melting wax and bread. You've started keeping notes again. Scraps of thoughts, bits of overheard conversation, tiny moments that feel too precious to vanish. You jot. The city thawed faster than its people. But the warmth is learning our names again. Outside, someone plays a fiddle, slow and off-key, but gentle. A couple dances clumsily in the street, their laughter echoing between buildings. You watch until the candle gutters, then blow it out. Good night, forgotten winter, you murmur. You can rest now. Morning brings mist. Thick, soft, silver mist curling between rooftops, swallowing edges and turning the harbor into a dreamscape. You step outside and feel as though you've walked into a watercolor painting, one where all the outlines are still deciding whether to exist. You walk toward the old printmaker's shop again. It's open now, windows propped to let the damp air circulate. The new owner is young, his apron already ink-stained. He's rearranging prints, ships, maps, constellations. You recognize the smell of linseed oil and effort. He looks up. Looking for something particular? You shake your head. Just memory. He laughs. Sorry, sold out of that weeks ago. You wander through the shop, fingertips grazing the papers. One print catches your eye, the harbor, frozen midwinter, ships trapped like fossils. You buy it without thinking. As he wraps it in brown paper, he says, "My father said the river froze so hard you could walk from shore to shore." You nod. You could. I did. His eyebrows lift. You're lucky, then. You smile faintly. Not sure lucky is the word. Outside, you carry the print carefully, as though it might melt in your hands. The mist thickens, softening everything it touches. The city looks almost kind. You head down Broad Street, where merchants are setting up stalls again. Fishmongers shout about the freshness of their catch, which is debatable but enthusiastic. A boy offers roasted chestnuts. They smell smoky and sweet, and you buy a handful just to feel the warmth on your palms. You walk toward the Battery, the southern edge of the city, where the sea opens wide. From here, the horizon looks like something reborn. The wind is cool, not cold. Brisk, not cruel. A woman nearby is hanging laundry, sheets that billow like sails. Feels strange, doesn't it? She says suddenly. What does? All this softness, after so much sharp. You nod, like the world forgot how to whisper. She smiles. Maybe it's remembering. You linger there, watching the water, eating chestnuts, listening to the creak of masts and the cries of gulls. The city feels alive again, but there's a hush beneath the sound, as if everyone still remembers the weight of silence. Historians still debate what the winter of 1780 meant, whether it shaped the war, whether it broke spirits or forged them. But walking here, breathing this new air, you realize something else. The winter didn't define people. The thaw did. As evening falls, you unroll the print at your table. The frozen harbor stares back at you, stark, haunting, serene. You take up a small brush and add one thing. A bird, tiny and almost invisible, flying above the ice. You lean back, studying it. There, you whisper. Now it remembers to hope. The candle burns low. Outside, the mist thins into stars. You probably won't make it through this night without a little warmth in your chest. But that's all right. You've earned it. The city is soft again. Too soft, almost suspiciously so. You walk along the waterfront and the cobblestones no longer bite at your boots. The sun leans low and gold through a pale morning haze, as though it's also learning how to be warm again. The harbor, once a silver prison, ripples lazily with tide. It sighs more than it roars. You breathe in. The air smells of salt and yeast and something else, relief maybe. Down by the wharf, a sailor tunes a fiddle while another mends a net. A group of children chase each other through puddles, splashing like it's their sworn duty to undo everything winter did. You smile, watching their laughter rise like the smoke from bakeries that have reopened after months of frost. The scent of bread, real hot bread, is a hymn. You pause by a newspaper nailed to a post. The ink's still wet, the letters bold. The coldest winter remembered, 1780. Someone's drawn a little doodle in the margin, a stick figure slipping on ice. You chuckle. History always starts as tragedy and ends as comedy, given enough time. A man beside you mutters, "They make it sound like it's over." You turn. He's bundled in a patched coat, face lean but bright-eyed. "Isn't it?" He shakes his head. Cold like that doesn't leave quick. It just hides under the floorboards. You can't tell if he's being poetic or practical. Maybe both. You continue north along Pearl Street. A cat darts from an alley, tail high, free of the terror that ruled the frozen months. Snow used to pile so high here that doors became walls. Now they open to a world of puddles and mud, messy, imperfect, alive. At a street corner, a vendor sells roasted apples. You buy one, bite in, and nearly burn your tongue. You don't care. The flavor tastes like remembering how to feel. He grins. Haven't sold a warm thing since December. You laugh softly. How'd you keep your stall going? Didn't, he says. But hope's cheaper than rent. There's that dry humor New York loves so much. Even now, when the city's half unfrozen, it finds its voice again. Sarcastic, stubborn, almost cheerful. You wander toward Trinity Church. The bell that once froze mid-swing now rings again, cautious at first, then bold. Each toll vibrates through your ribs. You pause under the shadow of its steeple and look up. Snowmelt trickles from the eaves, tiny silver threads catching light. You think of the ice that once buried this place, how people crossed from Brooklyn to Manhattan on foot, how cannon wheels and carts rolled where ships once sailed. Historians call it impossible, but so many swore it happened. Maybe truth freezes, too, preserved in disbelief. Inside the church, the pews are full again. People sit quietly, not out of fear, but because silence has become sacred. The minister's voice carries like a soft wind, talking about endurance, faith, and the strange mercy of seasons that end. You catch only fragments. We thought we would never see the thaw, and the Lord moves even through the frost. You look up at the stained glass, light streaming through blue and gold, dappling the walls. A woman beside you hums softly, a lullaby meant for no one and everyone. You close your eyes. Feels like the city is humming, too. When you step outside, the air tastes faintly of spring. Not fully, not yet, but enough to believe. You walk back toward the harbor, where the ice once ruled, and watch the waves again in motion. The wind pushes them like a child testing new strength. The ships are moving out now, sails unfurling in cautious pride. You raise a hand in quiet farewell, as if waving to an old friend, or perhaps to the winter itself. As dusk creeps in, you sit by the dock, notebook in your lap. You write, "We forget how to breathe until the world exhales first." You pause, smile, and add, "Also, I miss the quiet, but only a little." You close the book and let the tide whisper. The water answers back in soft, knowing sounds. The thaw reveals everything that winter tried to hide. You walk through narrow alleys and open squares where snow once smoothed over imperfections. Now, cobblestones show their cracks again, doors creak open, and even the paint on walls looks older. The city, stripped of its clean white disguise, is suddenly honest again. A blacksmith hammers away in his shop, the sound sharp and rhythmic, like a heartbeat returning to the street. Sparks fly, warm and alive. You stand by the doorway and watch the glow, mesmerized. He glances up and nods, not needing words. His forge never froze completely, he says. He just used less fire and more patience. Patience keeps you warmer than coal some days, he jokes. You nod. Depends who you're waiting for. He grins. Spring, mostly. You continue toward the East River. The water moves freely now, no longer a mirror but a pulse. Barges creak. Ropes slap against masts. You feel a strange ache, the kind that comes when something hard ends, and you're not sure whether to celebrate or grieve. You stop by a tavern window where two sailors argue over a map. One insists the ice stretched clear past Staten Island. The other swears it never went that far. Historians'll settle it. One laughs, which is the 18th century version of saying let the internet fight about it later. You order a cider, sit near the fire, and listen. Around you, people are doing what they always do after disaster. Exaggerating, forgiving, and pretending they weren't scared. One woman tells of neighbors who shared firewood through a crack in the wall. Another remembers a cat that guided her home through the snow. Someone claims he saw lightning in the middle of the storm, blue and silent. No one believes him, but no one argues either. In winters like that, truth wears too many coats to recognize. When you leave the tavern, night has fallen. The streets gleam wet and silver. You hear laughter spilling from doorways, the sound of people rediscovering noise. You walk to the edge of the pier, where lanterns glow over the water. The ice is gone, but you can still hear it in memory. The distant groaning, the creaking, the eerie quiet. You whisper to yourself, "We lived through glass." Somewhere in the distance, church bells ring. It's almost gentle now, a lullaby for a city thawing in its sleep. You close your eyes, listening to that faint metallic hum. You remember the frozen harbor, the muffled world, the long nights when even breathing sounded loud. You remember how time felt like frostbite, slow, creeping, inevitable. And now you stand in the same place, feeling warmth crawl back into your bones. A thought drifts by, maybe spring doesn't erase winter. Maybe it just forgives it. You smile at that. Feels true, or at least true enough for tonight. The tide laps against the dock. Somewhere behind you, someone hums a tune. The melody floats on the air like a promise. You whisper, "Tomorrow will melt too." And for once, that sounds like hope. You wake before dawn. The room is silver with mist, and for a second, you wonder if winter has crept back in the night. Sneaky, jealous, unwilling to be forgotten. But no, the air doesn't bite this time. It just brushes your skin like cool breath. You sit up, rub your eyes, and watch the light creep through the frost-flecked window. It's not cold anymore, not really, just cautious, like the world is testing its own pulse. Outside, the city yawns awake. Somewhere down the street, a cart rattles by, and a dog barks, delighted to have something to bark at again. The smell of coffee, real coffee, not scorched grain, drifts from a nearby kitchen. You follow it like a pilgrim. You find the small cafe tucked behind a printing shop, its windows fogged, its tables full of chatter. The owner, a woman with arms dusted in flour and eyes that look like they've seen every winter since time began, hands you a steaming mug. "You survived the freeze then?" she asks with a smirk. "Barely," you say. "Thought the harbor was going to swallow us whole." She chuckles, pouring another cup for a sailor nearby. "The harbor's always hungry. It just got teeth this year." You sip. The coffee's strong enough to wake the ancestors. You smile into the steam. Around you, conversations drift. Fishermen talking about broken nets, merchants about lost shipments, lovers about finally being able to walk without slipping into embarrassment. The noise is messy, chaotic, human. You'd forgotten how beautiful noise could be. A newspaper lies open on the counter beside you. The headline reads, "Supplies return as ice recedes." Below it, a smaller note. Some locals still report phantom sounds of cracking ice at night. You smile. The mind keeps echoes longer than the ears. Later, you wander toward the waterfront. The thaw has left behind an odd landscape, mounds of half-melted snow, bits of broken barrels, a child's toy boat marooned in the mud. The air smells faintly metallic, as if the world's still digesting all that ice. The harbor itself looks tired but proud, water rolling gently where walls of ice once stood. You stop by the pier, where an artist sits sketching the scene. She's drawing the harbor with a kind of reverence usually reserved for saints. The paper shivers slightly in the breeze. "You were here?" you ask. She nods without looking up. "Every day. Watched the ice choke the river. Watched it leave." You glance at her drawing. Delicate lines, tiny details. The faint outline of a man walking along the shore. "You captured the cold well," you say. She smiles faintly. "It never really leaves the hand." For a moment, you both just watch the water. A ship creaks in the distance, gulls argue overhead, and the wind carries the faintest scent of salt and hope. You can almost hear the ice cracking again. Not from memory this time, but from something deeper, something that wants to remind you how thin survival really is. You leave her there and wander further inland. Streets that once echoed with silence now brim with motion. Children chase each other around puddles, merchants shout from stalls, and everywhere there's a kind of cautious laughter. The kind people use when joy feels new again. You pass a tailor's shop where a man is arguing with a customer about the price of mending wool coats. "Cold's over," he says cheerfully. "Warmth comes cheaper." You grin, thinking he's wrong. Warmth never comes cheap. At the end of the street, a church bell rings the hour. You stop and listen, realizing how easily sound travels now. The air's softer, carrying echoes farther. The city seems to breathe along with it. Inhale, exhale, rebuild. The thaw isn't just weather. It's permission. You walk home through streets that glitter with melted snow, past neighbors sweeping doorsteps, past horses stamping impatience at being still. The harbor wind follows you all the way, no longer cruel, just present. You pull your coat tighter out of habit more than need. And as you reach your door, you think, perhaps the hardest part of survival is remembering you survived. That night, you dream of the harbor. In your dream, it's still frozen, smooth, silent, endless. You're walking across it again, boots leaving no mark, air sharp as glass. But this time, you're not afraid. You walk past ships locked in crystal, their sails frozen mid-billow, their shadows stretching like memories beneath the ice. Above you, the stars burn steady, patient witnesses to everything that refuses to stay still. You stop midway across and look down. Beneath the ice, faint lights flicker. Lanterns, maybe, or the ghosts of the city's reflections. You lean closer. The ice cracks just slightly, whispering something that might be your name. You wake with the sound still in your ears. For a long moment, you just lie there, listening to your own heartbeat echo the rhythm of melting. Then you get up, wrap a blanket around your shoulders, and move to the window. Outside, the sky is the soft blue of a candle's last flame. Fog drifts low over the harbor, carrying the faint glint of moonlight. Somewhere, a bell rings midnight. You think about all the things still frozen in people's hearts. The fear, the loneliness, the quiet they learn to live with. Maybe spring can thaw that too. You whisper to the dark, "We made it." The world doesn't answer, but it doesn't need to. The silence feels different now, not absence, but rest. The next morning, you find yourself at the edge of town, where the land meets the lingering marsh. The ground squelches underfoot, soft and forgiving. You crouch and run your fingers through it, wet earth, dark and alive. You hadn't realized how much you missed the smell of dirt. Nearby, a group of soldiers passes, laughing as they haul supplies back toward the fort. One waves at you. "Feels like we beat the British and winter both," he says. You grin. One was colder than the other. He laughs, salutes with mock solemnity, and trudges on. You watch until they vanish into the mist. Back in the city, a man stands on a crate, reading aloud from a broadsheet. "The harbor is free again," he proclaims. "Ships will sail before week's end." Cheers ripple through the crowd. You feel the sound move through your chest. Not noise, exactly, but proof of motion. You catch fragments of conversations, plans to rebuild, to trade, to travel. Someone mentions a rumor that this winter, this freeze, will be remembered for centuries. You smile at that. Memory's the one thing colder than ice. It never melts all the way. You turn toward the harbor one last time. The ice is gone now completely. The water ripples gold beneath the rising sun. For a brief moment, you see the reflection of ships, people, gulls, and, faintly, yourself. Everything moving. Everything alive. You whisper, "Goodbye, forgotten winter." The tide answers with a sound like a sigh. You start back home, step slow, steady. The street feels familiar again, not just because it's warmer, but because it remembers your weight. You pass a window filled with baked loaves, another with printed pamphlets titled The Great Freeze of 1780. People will study it, argue over it, write songs about it. But you were there. You know it wasn't about records or ruin. It was about stillness, how the world held its breath and somehow, against all odds, remembered how to exhale. You pause before your door, look once more at the harbor, and whisper, "See you in history books." Then you step inside, and the city exhales with you. The first true warmth of spring arrives quietly. The kind of day that doesn't announce itself but hums underneath everything. You notice it not by the temperature but by the sound. Snowmelt trickling through gutters, shutters creaking open, a dog snoring lazily in the sun. You step outside and feel the air touch your face like an apology. It's soft, a little damp, and scented faintly of mud and salt. The city is shedding its layers. Men roll up their sleeves. Women hang linens that dance in the sea breeze. And the harbor, that stubborn old mirror, has turned liquid blue once again, finally reflecting the sky instead of hoarding it. You walk toward the docks where the first ships of the season prepare to sail. The wood is slick from thaw, ropes heavy with water, but the crew hums cheerfully. Someone whistles a tune, not quite in key, but happy enough to forgive. You overhear a sailor bragging to a companion. "A man could have walked to Staten Island in January." His friend laughs, shaking his head. "You did, Thomas. You fell through halfway." "I said could've, not should've." The first man grumbles. You smile. Exaggeration is the city's second language. A few yards down, a cart carries barrels marked molasses and rum. Trade is coming back. So are tempers. You pass two merchants arguing over dock space. Their words sharp but somehow friendly. The kind of argument that feels like breathing after months of holding air in. Beyond them, the harbor master's office stands open for the first time in months. Papers flutter in the breeze like pale birds. Inside, a clerk dips his quill, muttering about lost manifests and frozen ink. You lean against the doorframe. "How's business?" He looks up with bleary eyes. "Wet, but moving." That about sums it up, you think, for him, for the city, for everyone. You walk along the waterfront until the noise fades. The air grows quieter, cooler, touched by salt. You stop at the edge where the old pilings vanish beneath the waves and stare at the water. The tide moves gently, no drama, no defiance. Just rhythm. A memory flickers. The same view months ago, all white and still. You standing there, breath hanging like smoke, convinced spring might never come. It feels like remembering a dream you almost believed was real. You reach down, touch the water's surface. It's cold but not cruel. The ripples spread out and catch the sunlight, fracturing it into tiny gold pieces that dance before fading. You whisper, "You came back." A gull answers with a sound somewhere between mockery and applause. You grin. Even the birds are sarcastic here. You head back through the streets. A fiddler plays on the corner, bow-sawing gently, tunes soft enough to fit into the rhythm of the city. You drop a coin into his cup and keep walking. At a bakery, the door stands open. Warm air billows out, carrying the scent of cinnamon and rising dough. You buy a roll just for the feeling of warmth in your hands. The baker grins, his cheeks pink from the oven. Feels strange to sweat again, doesn't it? You nod. Almost don't trust it. He laughs. "Don't worry. Summer'll fix that." Later, as the sun lowers over the rooftops, you climb the small hill by the church and look down over the harbor. The sky is streaked with orange and lavender. clouds brushing the masts like the strokes of a sleepy painter. Bells ring faintly from across the city, not in alarm this time, but in habit, as if to remind everyone that life, not frost, still keeps the time. You take a deep breath, the kind you haven't taken since before the freeze. The air fills your lungs and stays there, heavy, alive, human. You close your eyes and let it out slowly. Maybe, you murmur, the harbor isn't the only thing thawing. It rains that night. Not snow, not sleet, not shards of frozen spite, but honest rain. You wake to the sound of it drumming softly against the roof, a rhythm like heartbeat and memory mixed together. You stay in bed for a while, listening. The city outside murmurs in reply. Water running through alleys, gutters sighing, horses snorting beneath awnings. It's the kind of rain that doesn't ruin anything. It just rinses what's left. You light a candle, watch the flame tremble in the draft, and think how fragile light always looks right before it steadies. When the storm slows, you pull on your coat and step out. The air smells new. Not fresh exactly. There's still mud, tar, and old wood in it, but new. Streets glisten. The harbor wears a soft fog, the kind that makes even warehouses look romantic. You walk aimlessly through the rain-washed city. A lamplighter hurries past, cloak flapping. A couple shelters under a shared umbrella made from an old sail. Somewhere, someone's whistling. You stop by the market square, where puddles reflect the pale morning sky. A young boy splashes through them, laughing so hard his voice echoes off the stone. His mother scolds him half-heartedly, but you can see the smile she's hiding. You can't help smiling too. A cart rumbles by carrying barrels labeled Spring Ale. The driver calls out, "For those who live to drink again." You raise a hand and shout back, "I'll drink to that." He laughs, tossing you a bottle. You catch it, tuck it under your arm, and keep walking. Down by the waterfront, workers repair the pier. Hammers ring like church bells. Irregular, metallic, hopeful. The planks gleam dark and wet, smelling of tar and salt. One man wipes his brow, turns to you and says, "Never thought I'd miss sweating." You grin. "Give it a few months." He laughs, slapping a beam into place. "We'll curse the heat soon enough." That's the rhythm of it. Complaint as gratitude, gratitude disguised as complaint. The city's heartbeat returning to its usual tempo. You wander further along the pier until you find an old sailor sitting alone on a crate, pipe smoke curling around him like fog. His coat is patched, his beard white. He's staring at the harbor with the kind of focus that looks like remembering. You nod toward the water. Hard to believe it froze solid. He exhales, the smoke mingling with the mist. Harder to believe it thawed. You sit beside him. Together you watch a ship depart. Sails billowing, water parting, seagulls trailing behind like punctuation marks. The old man taps his pipe against the crate. "They'll forget, you know," he says quietly. "In a few years, no one'll believe the harbor turned to glass. They'll call it an exaggeration, a sailor's tale." You smile softly. "Then let them. We'll remember enough for both." He chuckles. Memory's lighter cargo than regret." As the ship fades into the horizon, the rain begins again. Light, playful, almost musical. You stand, tilt your face upward, and let the drops fall. Each one feels like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. You whisper to no one in particular, "The winter's gone," but it left its handwriting everywhere. And the harbor, gentle and gray, seems to agree, rippling once, like a nod. The days lengthen. The light lingers. You notice how the shadows now fall at a slower pace, as though even they are tired of rushing. New York, in its rough-edged 1780 way, begins to resemble something alive again. Carts clatter. Horses steam. The smell of fish markets mixes with the first green hints of thawing earth. You walk the cobblestones and feel them warm under your boots, like the city is breathing from underneath. By noon, the harbor shines like a coin half buried in sunlight. Ships arrive from the south with cargoes of oranges, tobacco, and gossip. You overhear a dockhand laughing. Boston's still digging itself out. You smile. Not because you're cruel, but because it's comforting to know someone else is colder. The great blizzard of 1780, that arrogant tyrant of a season, is finally nothing but a damp whisper in the alleys. Yet its echo lingers, in the warped doors that won't close right, in the habits of people still stockpiling bread just in case. And in the quiet way everyone looks up when the sky turns gray. You pass an old tavern with its shutters thrown wide. Inside, a fiddler plays a jig while mugs clink and boots stamp. The innkeeper, seeing you hesitate at the door, waves you in. You look half-thawed, he calls. Come finish the job. You join a bench, and the warmth is immediate. Fire crackling, laughter swelling. The air thick with beer and relief. A man at the next table leans over. You hear the story? They say the East River froze so hard a cannon could cross it. You nod slowly. Could it? He grins. Depends on who's telling it. Historians still debate whether cannons actually rolled across the river that winter. Some say yes. Others insist the ice was too treacherous. You sip your drink, thinking that maybe truth and legend share the same frost. A woman in a green shawl joins the table, her hands rough from work but her smile wide. She tells of baking bread with melted snow because the pumps were frozen. It tasted like clouds, she laughs. Dirty clouds, but still, you chuckle. Better than chewing on frost. Barely, she says, and everyone laughs again. You sit back, letting the noise of the tavern fill the hollow places winter carved. It's not a loud joy, just human, textured, imperfect. The kind that reminds you warmth isn't just a temperature. It's a noise people make when they remember they survived. When you leave, dusk has fallen. A deep blue curtain pinned with stars. You walk home past the harbor where lanterns bob on the waves. Their reflections stretch and shimmer, long and lazy, as though the water itself is sighing. You stop and watch. For the first time in months, the night doesn't feel endless. It feels alive. Somewhere behind you, a clock chimes softly, not counting down, but forward. You smile. The sound feels like forgiveness. Morning brings wind. Not the knife-edged kind that tears through coats and hope, but a soft, bustling wind that plays with your hair and scatters gulls like paper confetti. The harbor looks busy again. Sails fluttering, crates thudding, curses floating in the breeze. You stand on the pier and take in the rhythm of it all. Ropes creaking, water lapping, boots stomping. The city hums in its own strange music. And yet, beneath the bustle, there's still something fragile. People laugh too loud. They greet each other too eagerly. It's as though everyone's afraid the ice might sneak back the moment they look away. You walk along a row of ships and pause by one flying a flag you don't recognize. Its crew speaks French, laughing in a melody you can't quite catch. A sailor nods at you, offering a wedge of dried fruit. You take it, a small, sweet rebellion against the memory of frozen bread. Tastes like sunlight. A historian, you know, the type who writes everything down as if paper can stop the weather, once told you. The harbor freezing was both tragedy and miracle. You hadn't understood it then, but standing here now it makes sense. The same ice that starved the city also connected it, literally. People walked between islands, trading food, stories, even hope. For a few brittle weeks, the city's geography rearranged itself into something almost kind. You look down at the harbor now, vast, shimmering, alive, and think how impossible that sounds. If you hadn't lived it, you might not believe it either. You wander toward the battery, where the water meets the open sea. There's a wooden bench there, damp from morning mist. You sit, watching the ships tilt with the tide. A young boy beside you tosses pebbles into the water, each splash small and deliberate. After a while, he says, "My papa says the ocean was asleep." You smile. "Then it must have had good dreams." He nods solemnly. "Bad ones too. It took our dog." You pause, unsure what to say. "The ocean doesn't mean to keep things," you offer gently. "It just forgets where it puts them." He nods again, satisfied with that answer, and throws another pebble. A gust of wind picks up, carrying the scent of salt and tar and something faintly sweet. Maybe someone baking nearby. You pull your coat tighter and close your eyes. The sound of waves blends with distant laughter, hammer strikes, horse hooves. This, you think, is the sound of a city remembering how to live. It's not perfect, it never is, but it's real. And after a winter that seemed determined to erase every trace of softness, real feels like luxury. You open your eyes again. The harbor glints in the sunlight like a mirror tilted toward heaven. Somewhere behind you, bells ring from Trinity Church. The sound folds into the rhythm of the tide, old and steady. You whisper to the wind, almost without meaning to, "We made it." The breeze catches your words, carries them across the water, and somewhere, you imagine, the ocean nods, tired, vast, and forgiving. The morning begins with the smell of thawing earth, rich, dark, and faintly metallic, like the scent of a buried promise resurfacing. You wake before dawn, as you've grown used to, when the world still hums low and unhurried. The city outside feels half asleep, its breath slow in the fog. You pull on your coat and step out into a street that looks newly painted, mist curling over cobblestones, windows glowing faintly amber. The harbor waits at the edge of everything, quiet but awake. Seagulls float like scraps of parchment over gray-green waves. A single ship creaks against its moorings. Somewhere, a fisherman hums an off-key hymn about patience, or maybe about breakfast. You smile to yourself. Patience and breakfast are, in this century, practically the same thing. By the time you reach the pier, the city has begun to stir. Barrels roll. Horses clop. A merchant argues over the price of molasses with a level of passion usually reserved for theology. You lean against a post, watching the sky shift from silver to pale gold. The light feels new. Not brighter exactly, but more trustworthy. A woman in a heavy shawl joins you. You recognize her, the baker who once handed you a loaf hard enough to break windows during the storm. She smiles, eyes wrinkling. "You survived," she says. "So did your bread." You reply, and she laughs. A low, tired sound that still carries warmth. She holds out a small roll wrapped in paper. "This one's soft. Proof of miracles." You take it, biting into the warm, yeasty center. "Miracles taste better with butter." You murmur, and she grins before heading off toward her stall. You eat slowly, staring at the water. Somewhere between the first bite and the last, you realize life doesn't return all at once. It seeps back in, crumb by crumb, like warmth through cold hands. A gull lands nearby, staring at you with the smug entitlement of something that has never paid rent. You toss it a bit of crust, cocks its head, unimpressed. "You're welcome," you mutter. The gull squawks, as if critiquing your hospitality. And there it is, the first proper argument of spring. Later, you wander up Pearl Street, where the frost once piled higher than carriages. The air smells faintly of wet wood and coal smoke. A blacksmith hammers something in the distance, a rhythm steady enough to feel like a heartbeat. On the corner, you see an old sign being repainted, the Frozen Anchor Tavern. The name is new, chosen to commemorate the winter that nearly undid the city. You stop and watch as the painter shades in the letters, his brush steady and sure. He glances at you. Good name, eh? Too soon, you reply. He chuckles. Give it time. Tragedy's just history with better marketing. You can't help laughing. He's not wrong. By afternoon, the streets are alive with sound. Children chasing one another through puddles. Vendors hawking pies. Bells chiming. You pause at the edge of Bowling Green Park, watching the trees, bare but brave, reaching for the soft light. Someone nearby says, "The harbor froze once. It might again." And for a heartbeat, you feel that truth settle heavy in your chest. It might, but for now it hasn't. You turn toward the water, letting the wind lift your hair, and whisper to yourself, "We'll be ready next time." The breeze carries your words out across the city, and you imagine them snagging on rooftops, ships, and the soft, stubborn hearts of everyone who survived that forgotten winter. It's late afternoon when the rain begins. Slow, hesitant, then sure of itself. You pull your collar up and walk anyway. After a winter of silence and snow, even the sound of rain feels like a conversation worth keeping. The drops hit the cobblestones with tiny applause. Water rushes in the gutters, and the city smells like iron and new beginnings. You step around puddles and think about how easily water changes shape. Snow, ice, mist, rain, yet remains itself. Maybe survival is just that, a willingness to become something else without vanishing. You duck under an awning outside a bookstore. The windows are fogged, the sign painted with neat lettering, D. Cooper, Books and Curiosities. Inside, it's warm and cluttered, smelling of paper and old glue. A bell tinkles as you enter. The shopkeeper looks up, an elderly man with eyebrows like tiny snowdrifts. "Cold again?" he asks. "Always," you answer. He smiles. "Then you'll want something to read." Paper remembers warmth. You wander the shelves. Maps of the colonies, pamphlets on philosophy, a few scandalous novels hidden behind dull titles. You pull down a thin journal labeled Weather Accounts, 1780. Inside, someone has written in neat, faded ink, "The harbor froze entirely, and the people crossed upon it as on land. Many were astonished, others merely hungry." You laugh softly. Hunger and astonishment, two of humanity's most enduring emotions. At the bottom of the page, another note in a different hand reads, "No record can capture the silence of it." You close the book and hold it for a long moment. The silence of ice, the silence of fear, the silence that made every heartbeat sound too loud. You remember all of it. When you hand the journal back, the shopkeeper says, "Keep it. The cold's in there, but so is the cure." You thank him, tuck it under your arm, and step back into the rain. The sky has turned a deep pewter gray. You walk past the harbor again. Ships rocking gently, their ropes humming in the wind. Raindrops splatter against the wooden piers, and somewhere, a dog barks joyfully, chasing reflections. You think about how much the city has changed in just a few weeks. People are smiling again. Bread is soft again. And history, well, history is already hard at work turning hardship into story. You pause by the water's edge. The rain has softened the world into watercolor. No edges, just motion. You look up at the sky and let the drops touch your face, cool and clean. You probably won't make it through this day. You whisper to yourself with a smile, without remembering how good it feels to be alive. And then, softer still, like and subscribe if you're listening from the future. The rain laughs against the rooftops. Somewhere, faintly, a church bell rings through the fog. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The harbor breathes, the city dreams, and you, small and warm beneath your coat, walk on. The morning sky glows faintly pink, the color of thawed dreams and unhurried beginnings. You step outside into a world that smells of salt, bread, and wood smoke. Proof that New York has finally remembered how to exhale. The street beneath your boots is damp but no longer treacherous. Water trickles along the cobblestones, threading through the grooves left by carriage wheels. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows, then seems to regret it immediately. You laugh under your breath. Even the birds are confused, you say, to no one in particular. The harbor is still in the distance, waiting, a patient mirror of the slow sunrise. You walk toward it, the morning fog curling around you like silk. Each step feels quieter now, as though the world itself is tiptoeing into a gentler chapter. You pass a group of dockhands mending nets, their voices rough but light. One hums an old sea shanty about a sailor who fell in love with the moon and got sunburned waiting for her to come back. The others join in, laughing through the chorus. You pause to listen, smiling. Music sounds different after silence, like warmth rediscovered, or forgiveness you didn't know you needed. One of the men nods toward you. Care to sing? You shake your head. I only sing in blizzards. Keeps the ghosts away. He grins. Then let's hope you stay silent forever. Fair point. The docks are busy now. Ships unload barrels, letters, and stories. A few soldiers stand nearby, their coats still patched from the winter campaign. You overhear one say, "If the harbor hadn't frozen, we might have lost half our men to the crossing." He's right, that's the historical fact of it. The frozen harbor, for all its cruelty, became an accidental ally. Troops and supplies crossed where ships could not. What nearly broke the city may have saved it. History is rarely polite that way. You wander along the waterfront, where gulls swoop low and the air smells faintly of tar and rain. Children chase one another between crates, their laughter sharp and bright. One slips and lands in a puddle, then giggles louder. You watch, and it hits you how absurdly resilient joy is. It freezes, cracks, thaws, and still comes back. Sometimes louder, sometimes stranger, but always back. A familiar figure catches your eye. The sketching old man, sitting on his usual bench, parchment spread across his knees. You approach quietly. He glances up. Back to see the ice? Back to see what's left of it, you say. He nods. Not much, but enough to remember. You sit beside him. The drawing today shows the harbor as it is now, open, soft, glimmering. A faint line of broken ice floats near the shore. He shades a gull into the corner, murmuring, "We remember the storm because it scared us, but we forget the thaw because it saved us." You watch the pencil move. "Maybe that's why I tell stories," you say. "So the thaw doesn't get forgotten again." He chuckles, eyes still on the page. "Then make them sleepy stories. People remember those best." You smile. Done. As the day deepens, the wind picks up. Not cold, not cruel, just restless. You stand, stretch, and look out at the harbor. The ice is truly gone now. The water moves freely, tugging gently at the shore. It makes a sound like breathing. Still here, you whisper to it. The waves, perhaps out of politeness, don't disagree. Dusk. The city hums. Candles flicker in windows. Boots scuff on cobblestones. The air is soft with the scent of smoke and salt, tinged faintly with something sweet. Roasted nuts, maybe, or new dreams. You walk through Broad Street, where tavern doors hang open and laughter spills out like warm light. You catch fragments of conversations. Someone boasting about surviving the winter without losing a single chicken. Another planning to name their newborn Frost out of stubborn pride. Humans do love poetic revenge. You pause at a small gathering near the docks. A crowd has formed around a fiddler and a storyteller. A tall woman with a deep voice that seems to fold the night around her. She's spinning a tale about the Harbor Queen, a mythical spirit who froze the waters to keep her sailors safe from war. She sang the sea to sleep, the storyteller says, and the world mistook it for winter. The audience murmurs, enthralled. Children press close. A sailor wipes his eyes and pretends it's the wind. You smile. It's not true, of course, but maybe it's real. Sometimes history prefers poetry to precision. A historian, sitting beside you with a notebook, scribbles furiously. You peek over his shoulder. He's written, popular myth, ice as guardian, possible metaphor for divine providence. You whisper, maybe it's just people trying to thank the cold for sparing them. He looks up, surprised, then nods slowly. Maybe gratitude sounds like myth. You grin. And maybe scholars are just people who never learned how to nap. He chuckles, writes that down too. You suspect he'll publish it as a quote from an unnamed local philosopher. The fiddler strikes a new tune, lively and low. The crowd begins to dance. Hesitant at first, then freer, feet slapping on the wet boards, skirts swaying, hands clasping. You watch the rhythm catch like fire spreading through dry straw. The storyteller steps back, smiling, her tale dissolved into laughter. You feel it then, the pulse of the city returning, slow but steady. After months of ice, New York has found its heartbeat again. As you turn to leave, you glance toward the harbor. The moonlight paints the water silver. Not frozen, not calm, just alive. You whisper, almost to yourself, the Harbor Queen's finally resting. A gull cries somewhere in the distance. Half scream, half song. And you decide that's her answer. You walk home through the narrow streets, your boots echoing softly. The lamps sway in the wind, their light trembling like memory. When you reach your door, you pause and look back. The city glows faintly through the mist, the same city that almost vanished beneath the cold. You breathe out, long and slow. We survived the impossible, you say quietly. Now we just have to remember how to live with it. You smile, step inside, and close the door behind you. Outside, the harbor sighs, a lullaby in salt and tide. And for the first time in a very long while, the night feels kind. The morning begins in silver light. The harbor reflects a sky so pale it looks painted in milk and fog, the kind of dawn that doesn't shout its arrival. It just hums softly, like the quiet prelude before someone tells a story. You rise before the city does. The streets still hold the memory of the night's chill, and your breath leaves little ghosts in the air. Somewhere, a bell chimes the hour, gentle, deliberate, as if trying not to wake anyone too suddenly. The great blizzard feels far away now, but you carry its echo, that strange awareness that even silence can roar. The cold taught you something you can't quite name. Maybe endurance, maybe humility, or maybe just how good tea tastes when you've earned it. Down by the docks, the world feels reborn in motion. The ice is gone, replaced by ships groaning, ropes creaking, sailors shouting at gulls like it's a fair fight. You pass a group of them arguing about the weather. It'll be another harsh one next year, one declares. Nonsense, says another. The sky's too blue to hold a grudge. You smile because hope apparently is now a meteorological argument. A small newspaper boy pushes past you, waving a fresh issue. Ice gone. Trade restored. The headline screams, as if the city needed reminding. Below it, in smaller letters, bread prices fall. Slightly. Progress one crumb at a time. You stop by the print shop again. The young man is still there, ink smudged across his cheek. He's printing maps of the harbor, not frozen but flowing. Different kind of beauty now, you say. He nods. A beauty you can't walk on, but one you can trust again. You run your fingers lightly over a finished print. The waterlines are delicate, almost alive. You think about how every map, no matter how detailed, is a form of hope. Someone's belief that the world can be known, drawn, navigated. Historians still debate whether the frozen harbor truly united the city or merely exposed its fragility. But looking at the map, you realize both can be true. Ice can both connect and divide. So can people. You leave the shop and walk toward the Battery, where gulls dip in the sunlight and children chase them with shrieks of glee. The air smells of salt, soot, and pastry, a combination uniquely, confusingly, New York. A man sells roasted apples from a cart. You buy one and sit on the stone wall overlooking the harbor. The warmth of the fruit seeps into your palms, sticky and sweet. You watch a small schooner sail toward Staten Island, its white sails gleaming. Once you could have walked that journey. Now it seems unimaginable, and that's how you know you're healing. The impossible has gone back to being impossible again. You take a bite, close your eyes, and let the sound of waves fill your chest. It's not silence anymore. It's peace. That evening, as the sun sinks low, the city glows in gold and gray. You walk home past Trinity Church, where a choir is practicing. The melody drifts out the door, low, slow, and tender. You pause, letting it wash over you. A young man beside you murmurs, "The sound carries better now that the snow's gone." You nod. So do prayers. He smiles, and the two of you stand there quietly, listening. When the final note fades, the silence that follows doesn't feel empty. Feels full, like breath between heartbeats, like spring after survival. Evening again. A thin fog curls over the harbor, softening the world to watercolor. You sit by your window, quill in hand, candlelight flickering across your journal. The city outside hums with low sounds, a lullaby of clinking glasses, distant laughter, creaking masts. You write, February thawed, March forgave, April is learning to trust us again. You pause, smiling faintly at your own poetic excess. Maybe surviving a frozen harbor gives you the right to be sentimental. The windowpane fogs as you lean closer to watch the street below. Two children chase each other through puddles. A woman sweeps her stoop, humming a tune that has no beginning or end. Somewhere, a dog barks at absolutely nothing because it can. You think about how the city has already begun to forget. The human mind, after all, was not built to hold frost for long. Soon, stories of that winter will fade into fireside exaggerations. I once walked to Brooklyn on ice. Someone will say, and no one will quite believe them, but you'll remember. Not the cold itself, but the quiet it left behind. The strange holiness of stillness before the thaw. You pour yourself a cup of tea and sit back, letting the steam warm your face. A soft drizzle begins outside. You can hear the drops hitting the street like tiny, polite applause. The candle burns low. Shadows climb the walls like tired cats. You think of the frozen harbor again, the way the city once held its breath, the way time seemed to pause mid-sentence. You wonder if it ever truly unfroze inside the hearts of those who lived through it. Perhaps not. Perhaps survival is a kind of gentle haunting. Historians, in their patient wisdom, still debate whether the winter of 1780 changed anything. Did it alter the course of the war? The city's trade? The people's faith? No one can agree. But sitting here, you realize that not all change needs to be loud to matter. Sometimes it's as soft as thawing ice, as quiet as a kettle's sigh. Outside, a carriage rolls past, wheels splashing through shallow puddles. A woman's laughter drifts from inside, light and unguarded. It's the kind of sound that means everything's going to be all right. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. You close your journal. The candle flickers once, twice, then steadies. Sleep well, Harbour, you whisper. You've earned your rest. The wind outside answers in the language of waves. And somewhere beneath that rhythm, soft, steady, endless, you can almost hear the city dreaming itself warm again. The morning comes wrapped in a haze of gray-blue mist. You wake to the sound of dripping eaves, the slow percussion of melting frost giving way to spring rain. The rhythm is lazy, deliberate, like nature herself is testing out her instruments after a long winter's silence. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and watch the condensation trace thin rivers down the window. Outside, New York looks half asleep. The harbor is open again, but it moves sluggishly, as if even the sea forgot how to flow for a while. There's something poetic about this city in its in-between state. Half thawed, half dreaming. You pull on your coat and step outside, greeted by a faint smell of damp wood and bread baking somewhere nearby. The streets are soft underfoot, lined with puddles that hold perfect reflections of chimneys and rooftops. The city feels like it's painting itself new each morning. A newsboy passes by, calling out the day's headlines, "Ships return from Charleston," and "General Washington visits the troops." His voice sharp against the fog. You nod, toss him a coin, and tuck the paper under your arm without reading it. You've had enough of grand events. You're more interested in the small ones now, the quiet acts of living that history tends to forget. At the docks, you find a small crowd gathered near a group of sailors unloading barrels. They're speaking in a mix of English, Dutch, and something you can't quite place, maybe German, maybe just exhaustion. You overhear one man say, "Never seen a winter like that in all my life." Another shrugs, "And never want to again." You smile faintly. The human spirit, it seems, comes with a reset button. Survive something once, and you immediately decide it'll never happen again. It's optimism disguised as denial, humanity's favorite coat. As you walk further along the pier, you notice an old fisherman repairing his nets. His fingers are cracked and red, but they move with quiet precision. You stop to watch. He looks up and says, "You ever seen water that's still?" You shake your head. He chuckles. Didn't trust it, not for a second. He's not supposed to hold still like that. It's like seeing a cat sit politely. You laugh. He's right, there was something unnatural about it. Beautiful, yes, but eerie. Like the world was holding its breath. He tells you a story about how, during the freeze, a group of men built a small tavern on the ice itself, serving rum to travelers who walked across the frozen harbor. You picture it vividly. Flickering lanterns, laughter echoing through the white expanse, mugs of ale freezing at the edges. That's your obscure tidbit for this section. The Ice Tavern of 1780. Whether it truly existed, no one can say for certain. Historians still debate whether it was real or just another sailor's tall tale, a bit of frostbitten folklore. But it feels true, doesn't it? You can almost see it, humanity's need for warmth and company, even in the middle of a frozen sea. As you make your way home, the city hums with quiet recovery. Street vendors are back, hawking hot cider and fresh bread. A woman leans from her window to shake out a quilt, and the smell of lavender fills the street. You think about how strange it is that life always comes back, not with fanfare or trumpets, but with small, domestic sounds. A broom on a doorstep, a kettle whistling, a child's laugh breaking through the fog. That's how survival sounds, not like triumph, but like routine. When night falls, the harbor glows again, not from the reflection of ice, but from lamps and firelight dancing on open water. You stand by the rail, watching ships sway gently in their moorings. You take a deep breath of the salt air. You survived. The city survived. And though no one will ever truly understand what it felt like, the weight of that silence, the glittering fear of standing on frozen sea, you know it will live somewhere in your bones. Spring arrives in earnest. The city no longer smells of smoke and survival, but of wet earth, baking bread, and something like relief. Trees that looked like brittle bones last month are now fuzzed with green, and the streets hum with that particular energy only early spring can bring. Optimism with chattering teeth. You walk through Broad Street, where merchants are already arguing about prices, as if the harbor had never frozen solid. Their shouts rise above the clatter of carts, the creak of wagons, the clip of horse hooves on cobblestone. Everything is moving again, and you almost miss the stillness. You stop at a small coffee house, one of the few that stayed open through the coldest weeks. The owner greets you like an old friend. "Survived, did you?" he says, pouring a steaming cup. "Barely," you reply. "I've learned that hot beverages are civilization's true foundation." He chuckles. "That, and complaining about the weather." You raise your cup in mock salute. "To human consistency." He grins. "To human contradiction." You both sip in silence for a moment. The place smells like roasted beans, damp coats, and ink. A comforting combination if ever there was one. A group of students nearby are discussing science, quoting Benjamin Franklin as if he were an oracle. One of them insists the harbor froze because of the grand solar minimum. Another argues it was divine disapproval. The third, looking particularly proud, says, "It was obviously cold air." You can't help but smile. Humanity never changes. Give people a mystery, and they'll immediately start arguing in circles about it. Historians, too, still debate whether that winter was a freak of nature or part of a greater pattern. Was it divine, cyclical, or simply unlucky? The answer, as usual, is yes. After finishing your coffee, you walk toward the harbor again. The ice is a memory now, but traces of it remain. Faint lines along the rocks, broken timbers that once formed makeshift bridges. Children play by the edge, tossing pebbles into the water. Each splash feels like punctuation, little exclamation marks in the city's new story. You close your eyes and listen. Seagulls cry, bells ring. The wind moves easily now, no longer sharpened by frost. Feels like the city is exhaling. You think about how you'll tell this story someday, how you'll describe the way the harbor turned solid, the way time stood still, the way neighbors became family out of necessity. And maybe you'll add one embellishment, perhaps about the ice tavern, or about someone ice skating all the way to Staten Island with a loaf of bread under one arm and dignity under the other. People won't believe you, and that's fine. Some things are meant to sound impossible. That night, you return home and write a single line in your journal. "The sea forgave us." Feels like both a confession and a blessing. You set down your quill, douse the candle, and let darkness settle around you like a warm blanket. Outside, the harbor whispers. Not in ice, not in silence, but in motion. The sound is soft, endless, and kind. Morning sunlight seeps through your window like honey, slow, golden, and warm enough to make you question whether the last few months were real at all. You stretch under the covers and listen to the faint sound of gulls outside, cawing in lazy circles over the harbor. They've returned with the thaw, like gossipers who simply must see what the humans have been up to during the freeze. You sit up and look out. The city gleams, rooftops shining, puddles catching light like mirrors, sails flickering in the distance. The air smells like damp wood and cinnamon bread. Someone, somewhere, is celebrating the end of the hardest winter anyone can remember. You make tea. You pour it too fast, spill a bit, and watch it slide down the table. Small mistake, small mercy. It means you're back to worrying about unimportant things again. You walk to the market square, boots sloshing through half-melted slush. The cobblestones are dark with moisture, but the chatter around you is bright and alive. Merchants shout over one another. Apples, fresh as May. Bread warm from the oven. Fish, not frozen, I promise. Someone laughs. Someone sneezes. Someone plays a fiddle badly but enthusiastically. The rhythm of the city returns like a heartbeat rediscovered. A few elderly men sit on a bench, discussing how back in their day, the snow was deeper, the wind stronger, the courage sturdier. You smile. Every generation swears its suffering was uniquely poetic. You're no exception. One of them mentions an old Dutch saying, "When the river freezes, God closes the book of the year." You like that, though you're not sure whether he's opened a new one yet. Historians still debate whether this particular winter 1780 was the coldest ever recorded in North America. The evidence, like the ice, has melted away over time, but the stories remain, crystallized in memory and ink. You stop by the harbor again. Ships creak against their ropes, eager to leave. The masts sway, gulls perch like notes on a musical staff. A young sailor approaches you, his cheeks pink from wind. "Ever seen the harbor frozen, sir?" he asks. You nod slowly. "Walked across it." His eyes widen. "Truly? Across?" You smile. "Truly. I recommend it only once." He laughs nervously, as though unsure if you're teasing. "I heard some folks had set up stalls on the ice. Sold hot wine and biscuits." You nod. "A tavern, even. Probably the coldest pub in history." He grins. "Wish I'd been there." You shake your head. "No, you don't." That's your third gentle joke of the morning, though it feels less like humor and more like honesty wearing a scarf. Later that evening, the harbor holds a small festival. Unofficial, unplanned, and therefore perfect. Lanterns hang from ropes, reflecting on the thawed water like fireflies trapped beneath glass. Children run along the piers, couples dance awkwardly to a fiddler tune, and an old woman sells pastries shaped like snowflakes. You buy one. It's dry and crumbly and utterly delightful. You take a bite, and powdered sugar dusts your coat like fresh snow. For a moment, you stand at the edge of the dock, watching light ripple over the dark surface. The water moves again, alive, restless, forgiving. You remember the silence of the ice and how it once seemed eternal. And now, standing here amid laughter and motion, you realize that eternity is an illusion. Everything ends. That's what makes it bearable. As the night deepens, you start your walk home through streets that glow with the warm gold of lanterns and the soft silver of lingering frost. Somewhere behind you, a bell tolls, slow and deliberate. You count 7 chimes, then lose the rest in the wind. You feel the city's pulse in your footsteps. It's alive again, and so are you. You wake to rain, not the sharp, punishing kind, but the gentle, melodic drizzle that taps on window panes like a polite visitor. It's spring's apology, a cleansing, forgiving sound. You brew tea again, this time perfectly. Small victories. Outside, the harbor's surface blurs under raindrops. Ships rock gently, and mist rises where cold meets warmth. The air tastes faintly of salt and smoke. You step outside, pulling your coat tighter, and start walking toward the old church on Pearl Street. Its bells haven't rung properly since January, when ice jammed the ropes. But now someone's testing them again. You hear a few off-key clangs, followed by laughter. It's the sound of a city finding its rhythm. Inside, the pews are mostly empty except for a few scattered souls. A mother humming to her child, an old man whispering prayers, a sailor tracing his hat brim as though it's a sacred relic. You sit in the back, letting the quiet swallow you. The air smells of beeswax and damp stone. You think about how, just months ago, this same space was packed with people seeking warmth and hope. They'd prayed for mercy, for sunlight, for bread. Some probably prayed for each other. You whisper your own small prayer, not for anything new, but in gratitude for what remains. When you leave the church, the rain has stopped. A faint rainbow hovers over the harbor like a ribbon tying the season shut. Children point at it, laughing. A street dog barks once and then trots through a puddle. You make your way toward the square again, where a crowd has gathered around a man performing some kind of magic trick. He's producing coins from thin air, making handkerchiefs vanish. You can see the sleight of hand clearly, but that's not the point. People cheer anyway. For a moment, you realize how starved everyone is, not just for warmth or food, but for wonder. An old woman selling apples offers you one. It's bruised and imperfect, but you take it gratefully. She says, "This city forgets fast, don't it?" You nod. "It has to." She smiles, toothless and kind. That's how it stays alive. As evening falls, fog rolls in from the water, wrapping the city in a soft gray shawl. The lamps flicker to life one by one, glowing like fireflies trapped in glass. You walk along the waterfront again, passing the same rail where you once stood in silence, watching the frozen harbor stretch endlessly. The wood is damp now, the air alive with motion. You rest your hands on the railing, close your eyes, and listen. The harbor whispers, the same voice as before, but softer now, gentler. You can almost hear it saying, "You did well. You endured. That's enough." As you turn to leave, a faint wind tugs your coat, as if to remind you, winter is never truly gone. It just sleeps somewhere under the water, waiting. You smile at the thought because that's what people do too. And so you walk home, steady, thoughtful, and warm. The forgotten winter is ending, but its echo lingers. In puddles, in laughter, in you. Morning unfolds like a letter you forgot to open, soft, hesitant, and full of quiet revelations. You wake to the sound of distant bells echoing through the harbor fog. They don't ring in warning this time, but in celebration. Ships have returned from distant ports, their sails still damp with salt, their decks stacked with barrels of sugar, rum, and news. You pull on your boots and step outside. The air is warm, not summer warm, but kind. It carries the smell of the sea mixed with something sweet, roasted nuts from a cart nearby. The harbor is bustling again, almost unrecognizably alive. Where there was once only ice and silence, there's now chatter, hammers, ropes creaking, and gulls squabbling over scraps. You can feel the pulse of the city coming back through your soles. You pause near a group of dockworkers unloading barrels. One of them, red-faced and cheerful, looks up and grins. "Feels strange to hear the water again, doesn't it?" he says. You nod. "Stranger to trust it." He laughs, a booming sound that carries over the waves. "Aye, that it is. But that's what we do, eh? Trust what's likely to drown us." There's something poetically tragic about that. The city survives on exactly that faith, trusting the water that feeds and threatens it in equal measure. You watch as a sailor tosses a rope, and another catches it midair. A small, perfect gesture of practiced teamwork. The scene feels timeless. If someone painted this moment 200 years from now, no one would guess it followed a winter that almost froze history in place. You wander into a tavern by the docks, the real kind, not the mythical ice tavern you once imagined. The room is dim but lively, filled with laughter, with smoke, and the clatter of mugs. You take a seat near the hearth, where the fire burns so steadily you almost forgive it for disappearing all winter. A fiddler plays a tune that sounds older than the building itself. People tap their feet in rhythm. The bartender slides you a mug of cider before you even ask. A small mercy of routine. You sip. It's warm, tart, and laced with cinnamon. Civilization in liquid form. At the next table, two men argue about history, not current politics, but the deep kind. One insists the harbor freezing solid was a sign from God. The other claims it was simple physics. The debate escalates until one of them says, "Well, I saw a horse cross the ice and live. What do you call that?" The first man replies without hesitation, A miracle. Or bad planning. You nearly choke on your drink trying not to laugh. Outside again. Twilight paints the city in strokes of indigo and gold. The air feels new, like something has been exhaled, released. You watch lamplighters make their rounds, one by one, turning night into a constellation of warm flickers. As you stand there, you catch your reflection in a puddle. It's faint, blurred by ripples. You look older, maybe wiser, though you suspect that's just the lighting. Historians still debate whether the winter of 1780 changed New York permanently or merely scarred it for a season. Perhaps that's the wrong question. Maybe the true measure of an event isn't in how it changes the world, but in how it changes you. You exhale, and your breath no longer turns to frost. You smile at that small, silent miracle. You walk home through streets that hum with life. A baker closes his shutters. A child skips through puddles. Somewhere above, a window opens and someone hums an old tune. One that sounds faintly familiar, though you can't quite place it. The city breathes again. And for the first time in months, you realize you're breathing easily, too. By mid-April, New York smells like damp earth and fresh beginnings. You wake to the sound of rain, heavy, cleansing rain that rattles rooftops and washes away the last traces of winter dust. You open your window and lean out just far enough to feel it on your face. It's cool and alive. The harbor fog has lifted entirely. Ships glide in and out like clockwork. The sea, once your enemy, now feels like a familiar companion again, grumbling but dependable. You decide to visit the Battery, where the view of the bay is widest. The path there is muddy, but you don't mind. Mud means warmth, and warmth means mercy. Along the way, you pass a few market stalls. One sells tulips imported from Holland. Another displays jars of honey so golden they look like bottled sunlight. You pause at a third stall, where a man is selling small carved trinkets made from driftwood, tiny ships, birds, and one figure skating over ice. You pick it up and smile. You remember, then? The man grins. Who could forget? Half my neighbors still talk about crossing the harbor like Moses. You laugh. Without the parting, though. He nods sagely. Well, we take what miracles we can get. You buy the carving and slip it into your pocket. A token of memory. At the Battery, the view stretches wide and clean. The water glimmers, the sky hums with gulls, and somewhere in the distance, a ship unfurls its sails like a sigh. You sit on a damp bench watching it go. A family nearby feeds crumbs to pigeons. The children squeal, their laughter high and bright. For a second, you close your eyes and let it all wash over you. The voices, the wind, the faint echo of waves against stone. The strange how quickly peace can return after chaos. As if the world simply tires of drama and decides to start over. A passing preacher stops and nods to you. God's grace returns in the thaw, he says. You nod. So does the mud. He laughs a good, honest laugh. Yes, his humblest blessing. You watch him walk away, his robe damp at the hem. You think about how faith and practicality seem to share the same boots here. As dusk falls, you wander back toward your neighborhood. The rain starts again, softer now, more like a lullaby. You pass familiar corners. The bakery that once rationed bread, the tavern where you shared cider, the church that rang uncertainly through the storm. Each place feels like a chapter closing with a whisper. You reach your door, step inside, and light a candle. The flame flickers gently, casting the same golden glow you once stared at through a much darker winter. You sit at your desk, open your journal, and write. The harbor no longer remembers its own stillness. But I do. You close the book. The candle burns steady. The city hums outside. And you, at last, feel ready to rest. The morning begins with birdsong. Real, unhurried, and almost too cheerful for someone who still carries the echo of frost in their chest. You lie in bed for a while, listening. Each chirp feels like a small, bright punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence you've only just finished reading. When you finally rise, sunlight pools across the floorboards in golden ribbons. You walk through it, feeling the warmth on your feet. The wooden planks creak softly, as though even the house itself is stretching after its long winter's nap. You make tea again. You've become very good at this. Possibly too good. There's a danger you'll start narrating your own pouring technique like it's a sacred ritual. Outside, the world is waking up properly this time. The harbor gleams, gulls will overhead, and the faint chatter of markets drifts through the open window. You decide to walk to Bowling Green, the city's small patch of green that has miraculously survived everything from Dutch settlers to snowdrifts taller than men. The grass there is still hesitant, more brown than green, but it's trying. You admire that. A few children play near the fence, their laughter echoing through the open square. You realize you've missed that sound, the pure, unguarded joy of people who don't know what history they're living through. You sit on a bench and watch the carriages pass. The city has slipped back into rhythm with almost suspicious ease. It's like watching someone recover from heartbreak and insist they're fine while still clutching the letter. A vendor passes by selling roasted chestnuts. You buy a small bag, warm enough to sting your fingers through the paper. Winter's not coming back, is it? The man asks, half joking, half fearful. You smile. If it does, I'll have these ready. He chuckles, pats your shoulder, and walks on. You remember the harbor again. The day it froze solid, when you walked across the ice like an explorer in a dream. That impossible silence, that eerie stillness, that moment when you realized that nature had decided to show you just how small you really were. Historians still debate how far the freeze reached. Some say the ice connected Manhattan to Staten Island. Others claim it reached all the way to Sandy Hook. No one agrees. The records are inconsistent, the eyewitnesses contradictory, and the ice itself, well, it's gone. Memory melts faster than water. But you were there. You remember. And somehow that's enough. You toss the last of your chestnuts to a pigeon who looks entirely too confident for his size. He stares at you, pecks once, and struts away like he's won a negotiation. Enjoy it while it lasts. You mutter half to him, half to yourself. You realize you're talking to pigeons now. You take that as a good sign. Civilization is returning to you in increments. As evening approaches, you walk home slowly, letting the long shadows stretch ahead of you. The city hums with a soft, satisfied kind of energy. Not bustling, not loud, just quietly sure of itself again. You pass a baker closing his shutters, a young couple arguing about nothing in particular, and a fiddler playing a tune that sounds suspiciously like one you heard in the Ice Tavern story. Maybe memory and melody are the same thing. They both linger long after the noise fades. By the time you reach your door, the first stars are peeking out. You stop to watch them, and one thought drifts lazily through your mind. The sky never froze. Not once. And that's somehow comforting. You wake before dawn to a quiet city. Not silent, just peaceful. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone is still asleep but the world itself has already begun moving. You step outside, pulling your coat around you, and start walking toward the docks. The air is cool but gentle, like a reminder that chill can exist without cruelty. The sky above the harbor is painted in pale lavender and silver. The first light of day stretches across the water, breaking it into thousands of glittering fragments. You stand there for a while, simply watching. For the first time in months, you feel that rare, fragile thing. Stillness without fear. The dock hands are already at work, their laughter echoing between the warehouses. Someone whistles a tune you don't recognize. Another calls out a joke that earns an exaggerated groan from the crew. You smile. A man unloading crates glances at you and says, "Feels strange, doesn't it? To see it moving again." You nod. like the world's heartbeat coming back. He grins. Aye. And now we've got to keep up with it. You sit on a crate for a while, just listening, the slap of waves, the creak of wood, the metallic clink of anchors. Every sound is ordinary, and that's precisely what makes it beautiful. You think about the months you spent listening for cracks in the ice, the groan of the harbor straining under its own stillness. Now, those sounds are gone, replaced by motion, by life. It's easy to forget how miraculous ordinary really is. By mid-morning, the city is fully awake. You walk through the streets, past open shutters and steaming kitchens. People greet one another again, sometimes awkwardly, as if relearning the art of conversation. At a corner, you see a bookseller setting up a stall. You stop to browse, running your fingers over worn spines. One title catches your eye, The Winter That Froze the Sea. You pick it up, amused. Too soon, you murmur. The seller overhears and grins. They say it's fiction. You smile. So did we at the time. He laughs and offers it for half price. You buy it mostly for the irony. That afternoon, you sit by your window reading. The author describes the frozen harbor like something from a myth, a shimmering expanse where time stopped and even God's reflection hesitated to move. It's exaggerated, romanticized, and wildly inaccurate. You love it, because truth, you realize, is overrated when it comes to memory. The facts don't keep you warm at night, the story does. As evening descends, a soft wind moves through the streets, carrying with it the faint smell of salt and smoke. You close the book and rest your head against the window. Outside, the harbor glimmers under a new moon. It's not the same as before, it never will be, but maybe that's the point. Survival always leaves fingerprints. You whisper to the city, or maybe just to yourself. You did well. A gull cries somewhere far off and you take that as agreement. You climb into bed, the book still open beside you. The candle flickers low. Tomorrow will come, full of errands and voices and headlines. But tonight, the sea is calm, the city is breathing, and you're still here to listen. Sleep finds you easily, and for the first time in a long time you let it. You wake to a soft rain. Not the sharp, metallic kind that lashes against windows, but the kind that whispers. It falls gently, like the sky is brushing dust off its shoulders. You sit up, stretch, and for once, there's no hurry in your bones. The rain taps steadily on the roof, and you think, the world's not frozen anymore, just slightly melancholic. You open the window. The air that drifts in smells of wet wood, coal smoke, and the ghost of salt from the harbor. It's oddly beautiful, like the scent of time passing quietly by. You pour tea again because at this point, it's practically a ritual offering to the gods of patience, and watch droplets slide down the glass. The streets below are hushed. Even the gulls seem contemplative. You decide to walk to the shoreline. Umbrella in hand, you trace the same path you took months ago, back when every street was buried in white silence, when breath turned to mist and the world seemed stuck between heartbeats. Now, puddles reflect the city like soft mirrors. Children run through them, shrieking and laughing, each splash a defiance against the memory of ice. You pass the old bakery. A sign in the window reads, "Hot cider back at last." You grin. Even small victories deserve announcement. Inside, the baker recognizes you. "You survived the frozen year," he says. "Barely," you answer, smiling. "But I'm still thawing." He hands you a cup, steam curling upward like a prayer. "It was the year the harbor stopped breathing," he muses. You nod. "And now it's exhaling." Back outside, you sip slowly, warmth spreading through your chest. The rain has softened to a mist, a kind of curtain between worlds. You walk toward the docks again, the city moving quietly around you. You reach the same spot where the ice once stretched like glass to Staten Island. You pause, letting your gaze wander over the restless gray water. There's movement everywhere now. Boats rocking, ropes creaking, seagulls slicing through the mist. This chaos in its gentlest form. You find an old fisherman sitting near a post, pipe smoke curling around him like fog. He squints at the horizon. "Never thought I'd see it move again," he mutters. You sit beside him. "You thought it'd stay frozen?" He shrugs. "Didn't think much at all. Just stopped believing it would end." You both watch in silence. Some truths don't need language, only patience. Historians still debate how the freeze of 1780 truly changed New York. Some say it crippled trade for years. Others argue it brought the community closer. No one agrees, of course. If scholars ever agreed on anything, they'd have to find new jobs. But for the people who lived it, people like you, the change isn't something that can be measured in ledgers or timelines. It's in the way they pause when snow begins to fall, the way their hearts tighten slightly at silence, the way they never take warmth for granted again. The fisherman exhales a cloud of smoke that disappears into the mist. "Funny thing," he says softly, "I still hear it sometimes. That silence. The sound of nothing moving." You nod. You hear it too, faintly like a memory under layers of noise. But now, instead of fear, it brings a strange comfort. Because you know what comes after. As dusk begins to fall, you walk home slowly, passing the familiar cobbled streets. The lamps flicker on, one by one, small golden anchors in a sea of gray. And somewhere deep inside, the last shard of winter begins to melt. You don't notice it at first, but it's there, the quiet surrender, the letting go. The final night comes softly. You lie in bed, the candle burning low, the air thick with the scent of rain and cooling wax. Outside, the city hums gently, not loudly, not urgently, just peacefully existing. You close your eyes and listen. Wheels over cobblestone, footsteps fading down an alley, a muffled laugh somewhere below your window, the kind of sounds that mean everything is normal again. You think of that first morning, when the world was white and brittle and you stepped into air so cold it felt like glass against your skin. You think of the harbor, the frozen expanse where ships sat like sculptures, of the faces that appeared and disappeared in the snow, of the warmth you carried, even when you didn't realize it. All of it, the silence, the fear, the wonder, has become part of you, woven into the quiet corners of your mind like threads of silver frost. You take a long, deep breath. The candle flickers once. The story is almost over now. And so, the narrator's voice softens, the words slowing, stretching like the horizon at dusk. You are still in that city, still watching the harbor, but it's different now. The ice is gone, the sky is open, and the water moves freely, glittering with reflected light. The people laugh again. The wind carries songs instead of warnings. The streets smell of bread and salt and something sweet you can't quite name. Remember the sound of your footsteps on the frozen harbor? Now listen, they're gone. Replaced by the soft lap of waves, the faint creak of wood, the murmur of a world in motion. You've come full circle, from silence to sound, from stillness to flow. If you're still awake, dear listener, thank you for walking through the storm with me. And if you're drifting off, that's all right too. You've earned your rest. Because some stories aren't meant to end with noise. They fade, like snow melting under sunlight, leaving behind only the quiet glow of survival. You take one more breath. The rain hushes, the harbor exhales, and the city, your city, finally sleeps. Crescent moon, good night. If you're still here, gently tap the like, whisper a comment with where you're listening from, and let the next tide carry you softly to sleep.